Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 8 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as the Akatsuki Mastermind controlling Shinobi history. Let the tale begin. Chapter 201, Tenzo and Anko. Tuning out his wandering thoughts, Danzo walked toward the would-release experimental subject, who was just a child, appearing only 7 or 8 years old. Sensing Danzo's approach, the child suddenly opened his eyes and looked at him. "Who are you, old man?" Danzo instinctively took a half-step back and then slowly replied, "I am Danzo, leader of Konoha's root." "And you, little one, who are you? What's your name?" The child hesitated, trying hard to recall his past, but the growing pain in his head made him give up. Shaking his head in confusion, he said, I don't know who I am either. I seem to have forgotten everything from before, but I had a nightmare where I was submerged in water, and there were lots of people in white clothes touching me." As he said this, the child looked around and saw the shattered glass containers, freezing in place. Perhaps what he experienced wasn't a nightmare, but a grim reality. Noticing the child's expression, Danzo sighed softly. He extended his hand toward the child and said, "I roughly understand what you've been through. Well then, would you like to accept my care, leave this place, and become a member of Root?" The child hesitated but, having no other choice, gently nodded. Seeing him agree, Danzo smiled and patted the boy's head, slowly saying, "Since you've forgotten your past and have no name, I will give you one. From today, you shall be called Tenzo." "Tenzo?" Tenzo repeated his new name several times, a faint smile appearing on his face. "I finally have a name. My name is Tenzo. And, for those who don't remember, Yamato is also called Tenzo." Noticing Tenzo's reaction, a subtle smile also appeared on Danzo's face. As the leader of Root, Danzo knew well how important it was to give an orphan a name. If he cultivated Tenzo carefully, he could gain a subordinate with at least the strength of an elite Jonin in the future. A few minutes later, Danzo left the Root lab with Tenzo. After returning to the Root base, he immediately placed the Cursed Tongue Eradication Seal on Tenzo and ordered his subordinates to destroy all would-release experiment data and anything linking him to it. He also began preparing to impeach Orochimaru. The grounds for impeachment were simple, just reporting that Orochimaru had conducted experiments on villagers was enough. After all, once Orochimaru got into research mode, he didn't care whether his subjects were allies or not. As long as he was interested in the experiment, he would even experiment on his comrades. Danzo didn't mind Orochimaru's behavior. In his view, contributing to Konoha was an honor for these experimental subjects. But Sarutobi Hiruzen, that hypocritical Hokage, was different. He cared about such things. Although he knew about the darkness in the shadows, he always presented a dignified and noble image. As Danzo gathered evidence and prepared to spread rumors unfavorable to Orochimaru, another pair of eyes watched him from the shadows. It was none other than Orochimaru, the main person in charge of the would-release project. After leading the Root lab, he had witnessed Danzo taking Tenzo under his wing. He was surprised that he had overlooked such a survivor. However, he chose not to confront Danzo to claim Tenzo but instead decided to bide his time in the shadows. First, because he believed his experiments couldn't have failed. In the previous batch, it was impossible for any child to adapt to the cells of Hashirama. Tenzo's survival was just an accident. And even if Tenzo had survived, it didn't guarantee he would awaken the would-release Kekkai Jinkai. Everything was still uncertain. As long as Orochimaru could contact Tenzo later, he could easily figure out the truth from Tenzo's blood. Secondly, Orochimaru wanted to see what Danzo was planning. It became clear that Danzo was secretly collecting evidence of his human experiments. Danzo's motives were obvious. He wanted to ruin the trust between Orochimaru and Hiruzen, thereby disqualifying him from being a candidate for the 5th Hokage. But Danzo seemed to have forgotten that they were collaborators. Even if Orochimaru lost his chance to become Hokage, Danzo wouldn't become Hokage either. And after all these years, Danzo still didn't realize that Hiruzen would never let him become Hokage. At this thought, Orochimaru couldn't help but marvel at Danzo's foolishness. Shaking off these distracting thoughts, Orochimaru turned and headed toward his base, vanishing into the darkness. Even though he had discovered Danzo collecting evidence against him, Orochimaru didn't plan to stop him. After all, he had indeed conducted those experiments. He had even attacked village Jonin to obtain experimental materials. In his quest to push the limits of ninjutsu and achieve immortality, Orochimaru had long stopped caring about the rules of the ninja world. Even if Danzo exposed everything he had done and caused the village's Jonin to fear him, he remained unafraid. After all, he no longer had any attachment to the Konoha. If Danzo and Hiruzen decided to target him, it would simply be the right time for him to leave this dull village and explore the greater ninja world. There were plenty of places in the ninja world outside Konoha where he could thrive. Not long after, Orochimaru arrived at his secret base. Upon seeing him, his subordinates straightened up and said, "Lord Orochimaru, you're finally here. Anko has been calling for you." "Anko wants to see me?" Orochimaru's expression changed slightly as Anko's image appeared in his mind. Anko was a girl of 12 or 13, whose personality was more like a boy's than a girl's. She was currently his only disciple, though her antics often gave him headaches. When he eventually defected from Konoha, he would surely take some loyal followers with him. But he hadn't yet decided whether to take Anko with him, unsure if he should leave her behind as a pawn or bring her along to wander the ninja world. When he saw Anko, she was holding a skewer of dango, smiling. "Orochimaru-sensei, I've been thinking about entering the Chunin exam soon. Can you give me special training?" "Forget about special training. I have other things to take care of." Orochimaru shook his head, having already made up his mind. A naive ninja like Anko was no longer suitable to remain his subordinate. It would be better for her to stay in the leaf and immerse herself in the will of fire. Unaware of Orochimaru's thoughts, Anko, feeling a bit disappointed, nodded. "Since you're busy, I'll come back later. I was hoping to spread the dango style after all." Chapter 202, Orochimaru's Defection. 3 days later, at the Hokage building. The third Hokage pulled out a box of cigarettes from his pocket, took one out, lit it, and inhaled deeply, exhaling a ring of smoke. Soon, he frowned. This box of cigarettes was a gift from his eldest son, Shinosuke, who claimed it tasted better and was healthier than his traditional pipe. But he still wasn't used to these modern products and missed the pipe that had been with him for decades. After a moment of thought, the third Hokage took out his pipe from the drawer. Tearing open the cigarette, he placed the tobacco inside the pipe, lit it, and inhaled deeply through the pipe's mouthpiece, showing a satisfied smile. Indeed, the old ways suited him better. There was no need to force himself to embrace the new era. After settling himself, the third Hokage turned his gaze toward the blank scroll on his desk. He planned to hand it to Jiraiya's summoning beast today so that Jiraiya could negotiate with the fourth Raikage on the front lines. At that moment, the door to his office was pushed open from the outside, and Danzo appeared before him. The third Hokage frowned, visibly displeased at the sight of Danzo. Just as the third Hokage was about to speak, he noticed the group of Jonin standing behind Danzo, and his expression became grave. Could it be that Danzo was dissatisfied with his position as leader of the Root organization and was using this opportunity, while most of the village's forces were out, to stage a coup? The thought crossed the third Hokage's mind, but even he found it ridiculous. Danzo should know that he wasn't a match for him. Even if he somehow managed to defeat the third Hokage, he could never become the village's Hokage. Taking a deep breath, the third Hokage looked at Danzo and asked calmly, "Danzo, what's brought you here this time?" With a grim face, Danzo replied, "Third Hokage, last night, Orochimaru attacked the Root base, stole some of our records, and seriously injured my guard, Ryoma." "What did you say? Orochimaru attacked the Root?" The third Hokage doubted his own ears, staring suspiciously at Danzo. Since being assigned to work in the Root, Orochimaru and Danzo had always had a good relationship, with Orochimaru being a high-ranking member of the Root. Moreover, during the selection process for the fourth Hokage, Danzo had supported Orochimaru as a candidate. Given this relationship, Orochimaru attacking the Root base seemed highly improbable. However, Danzo didn't appear to be lying, and such an event could be easily verified by simply summoning Orochimaru to confront the allegations. Sensing the third Hokage's doubt, Danzo quickly added, Orochimaru did attack the root. Besides that, he also attacked several shinobi in the village, including members of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans. At that moment, the other Jonin stepped forward and shared their experiences of being attacked by Orochimaru. Third Hokage, Danzo-sama is telling the truth. Orochimaru attacked us, though he didn't kill us, only took some of our blood. Could Orochimaru be using our blood for his experiments? I've heard Orochimaru is fond of human experimentation. I never thought he'd target his fellow villagers. Third Hokage, you must bring justice to this matter. As the Jonin reported their encounters, the third Hokage's expression darkened. He wasn't sure if Danzo was conspiring with the other Jonin to deceive him or if Orochimaru had truly betrayed the village. If the accusations were true, how could he face his once prized student? Glaring at Danzo, the third Hokage addressed the Jonin, you are dismissed for now. I need some time to think. I will give you an answer within 3 days. Hearing this, the Jonin, along with Danzo, left the office. After leaving the Hokage building, the Jonin cautiously asked Danzo, Danzo-sama, will the third Hokage really deal with Orochimaru? Danzo shook his head grimly and replied, I don't know either. We'll just have to wait and see. Unlike his previous deceptions, this time Danzo was genuinely angry. Orochimaru had indeed attacked the root, even targeting Tenzo, whom Danzo had carefully protected. Though Danzo had long planned to use Orochimaru as a stepping stone, he hadn't expected Orochimaru to strike first, suggesting that Orochimaru had no desire to stay in the village any longer. A few hours later, guided by a Hyuga ninja, the third Hokage led an ANBU squad to a hidden laboratory in the Forest of Death. After forcibly breaking down the lab's door, the third Hokage found Orochimaru, along with numerous experimental subjects still encased in glass tubes, yet to be dealt with. Judging by the setup, the lab was being used for wood-release experiments. Seeing this, the third Hokage clenched his teeth, his heart heavy with grief. He couldn't believe that his most treasured student had been conducting secret human experiments, violating the very rules he had set. Taking a deep breath, the third Hokage's voice trembled as he spoke, Orochimaru, did you do all of this? Considering your contributions to the village, if you abandon these experiments, I will spare your life and let you remain a Jonin in the village. At this, Orochimaru turned to the third Hokage, shook his head, and said, I'm sorry, old man, but I can't agree to that. Without human experiments to explore the limits of ninjutsu, my life would be meaningless. The third Hokage asked, is the pursuit of the limits of ninjutsu more important than the will of fire? Ever since I lost the election for the fourth Hokage, I've lost interest in the village, my comrades, and the will of fire. Orochimaru first chuckled, then continued in a sinister tone, as for the village, is it truly the village of the leaf, or just your village? At least during Tobirama-sama's time, these human experiments were never forbidden. Hearing Orochimaru mention the second Hokage, the third Hokage's expression changed slightly. He sighed and said, Tobirama-sensei never harmed the village's ninjas. Please, don't persist in this folly. I don't want to have to deal with you myself. Orochimaru smirked, then assumed a fighting stance and said, Third Hokage, the narrow sky of Konoha can no longer contain my dreams. Before I leave, let me experience your strength one more time. Before the words had even left his mouth, Orochimaru raised his sleeve and shouted, Ninja art, hidden shadow snake hands. The third Hokage sighed inwardly, forming hand seals to summon Enma, the Monkey King. In an instant, Enma transformed into the adamantine staff and fell into the third Hokage's hands. Without hesitation, the third Hokage lunged at Orochimaru's position. Chapter 203, Orochimaru's Defection, Part 2. Orochimaru's strength was not to be underestimated. During the Third Great Ninja War, he had assassinated the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, B, and led Konoha's forces to victory against Tsunagakure in the Battle of Kikyo Pass, making him one of the most powerful figures in the ninja world. But even with such strength, he was gradually falling behind in the seamless staff techniques of the third Hokage. Looking at the still vigorous third Hokage, Orochimaru's eyes were filled with dread. He had known his teacher was strong, but he hadn't expected him to be this powerful. Without any preparation, he couldn't possibly defeat the third Hokage. Using the Orochi substitution jutsu to evade a heavy blow, Orochimaru retreated several dozen meters. His hands formed seals and slammed into the ground, causing the once soft grass to transform into hundreds of poisonous snakes that surged toward the third Hokage. The third Hokage lightly tapped his toes and leapt into the air. His chest expanded as he growled, "Fire style, dragon flame bomb." In an instant, the ground turned into a sea of flames, completely engulfing the swarm of poisonous snakes. Seeing this, beads of sweat appeared on Orochimaru's forehead. He hadn't left Konoha immediately because he wanted to test his teacher's strength, but now the situation was spiraling out of control. If he didn't use his full strength, he might really die here. As for surrendering to the third Hokage, the thought crossed Orochimaru's mind, but his heart no longer belonged to Konoha. He would leave eventually, one day. Even if he surrendered now to save his life, he would be imprisoned in the village, losing his freedom. Rather than sacrificing his freedom to stay in a dull village like Konoha, he decided it was better to take the risk and defeat the third Hokage. He was also interested in studying the Sarutobi clan's bloodline. Closing in on the third Hokage, Orochimaru transformed his body into a giant snake and lunged. The third Hokage stood his ground without dodging, and said calmly, "Orochimaru, do you really have no intention of staying in the village?" Orochimaru didn't answer. He had already circled behind the third Hokage. All he needed was to inject his venom into the Hokage's body, and he would win this battle. However, just as Orochimaru was about to attack, a flash of white light burst forth on the snake's head, detonating directly on Orochimaru's body. As the dust settled, a bloodied Orochimaru slithered into the forest. He didn't dare stay any longer. At some point, the third Hokage had placed several explosive tags on Orochimaru and disrupted his sensory abilities with Jinjutsu. It was only after realizing this that Orochimaru understood the gap between him and his teacher. Not only was the third Hokage significantly stronger than him, but his battle experience was also far superior. If the third Hokage hadn't held back, Orochimaru might have already died. Watching Orochimaru retreat, the third Hokage stopped and chose not to pursue. The battle had taken a great toll on him. It had been a long time since he had fought so fiercely. If he recklessly chased after Orochimaru, there was a chance he might get countered and killed. After calming his breathing, the third Hokage sighed in relief. "I didn't expect Orochimaru to have grown this strong. If I hadn't prepared in advance, I might not have been his match." Enma, who was by his side, said flatly, "Hiruzen, wasn't it because you were holding back? If you hadn't been aiming to capture him alive, you would have had many chances to kill him." Hearing this, the third Hokage fell silent. Enma was right, he had indeed held back during the fight. Seeing through Hiruzen's thoughts, Enma sighed lightly, "I know you can't bring yourself to kill your student, but old friend, I have a feeling that one day you'll regret your actions today." The third Hokage responded with a complex expression, "Maybe, but I really couldn't do it. Letting Orochimaru leave Konoha might be for the best." After speaking, the third Hokage looked at Enma, who remained silent. Though Enma was the third Hokage's summoned beast, he had also watched Orochimaru and the others grow up. He understood the Hokage's feelings and didn't want to see Orochimaru's blood on his hands. A few minutes later, Danzo and several Konoha Jonin finally arrived. Seeing the devastated land, they all looked toward the third Hokage. Judging by the scene, it seemed like the third Hokage had won the battle. But what about Orochimaru? The third Hokage sighed deeply and said with a complicated expression, "Just now, Orochimaru wounded me and defected." The Jonin were shocked, disbelief written on their faces. With the border conflict having just ceased and peace talks in a crucial phase, one of the Sannin, Orochimaru, had wounded the third Hokage and defected. This was not good news for Konoha. At that moment, the third Hokage, full of regret, declared, Due to the danger posed by Orochimaru, I will designate him as an S-rank missing nin. Every Konoha ninja will have the duty to capture him. Yes, Lord Hokage. The Jonin all nodded in agreement, but in their hearts, they knew capturing Orochimaru wouldn't be easy. Was there anyone other than the 5 Kage who could even contend with him? Danzo glared at the 3rd Hokage, committing the event to memory. He didn't believe that the 3rd Hokage lacked the ability to kill Orochimaru. He must have let him go out of sentimentality. The 3rd Hokage wasn't just indecisive, he was also too soft on the ninja around him. If it were him, he would never have let Orochimaru go. However, just because the 3rd Hokage wouldn't act didn't mean Danzo wouldn't. He needed to capture or even eliminate Orochimaru. Orochimaru knew too many of his secrets and was an extremely unstable factor. Meanwhile, after running for over 10 kilometers, Orochimaru slithered into a cave and began healing his injuries. The wounds on his body were severe, and it would take at least a month to recover. During that month, he would have to deal with Konoha's pursuit. Although his teacher had held back during their fight, that didn't mean the subsequent chase would be lenient. His former partner, Danzo, would also undoubtedly try to hunt him down. During this month, he could only muster the strength of an average Jonin, making it difficult to shake off Konoha's pursuit. Perhaps, he would have to head to Ryuchi Cave for a while. But Ryuchi Cave was different from the other 2 Great Sage regions. It was a world where only the strong survived, with snakes devouring one another. Losers would become the victor's prey. Thinking this over, Orochimaru abandoned the idea of going to Ryuchi Cave and instead turned his gaze northward, toward Amigakure. Chapter 204, Intelligence. In the Land of Hot Water. Due to a strong recommendation from Amigakure, the location for the peace talks between Konoha and Kumogakure was officially set in Yugakure. The Land of Hot Water, where Yugakure is located, is a country extremely rich in natural resources. However, despite these favorable conditions, the strength of its ninja is far below the average for the ninja world, even weaker than Kusagakure. After arriving here, Yahiko and Konan seemed to understand why Kumogakure wanted to invade the Land of Hot Water. The country, though weak, occupied such a rich land. If they were in Kumogakure's position, they might also be tempted to seize it. Seeing Yahiko and Konan's thoughts, Byakuya smiled and said, "Yahiko, Konan, are you interested in the Land of Hot Water? If you really want it, we could always consider claiming this land." Yahiko gave Byakuya a wary look and shook his head. "Byakuya, we're here to mediate between Konoha and Kumogakure, not to invade the Land of Hot Water." Byakuya, with a meaningful tone, said, "Perhaps Yugakure needs our protection. Amigakure lacks resources, while Yugakure lacks military strength. Wouldn't it be a perfect match?" Hearing this, Yahiko and Konan fell into deep thought, considering the feasibility of Byakuya's suggestion. After years of development, Amigakure had basically completed its internal construction, and its chakra system had reached an early stage of industrialization, producing many goods and products. If they could bring the Land of Hot Water under their influence, they would have both raw materials and a market. But the current issue was that the Land of Hot Water wasn't actually governed by Yugakure. The current leader of Yugakure only had the strength of an elite Jonin, which made him a top figure in smaller villages, but not much in the eyes of the 5 great ninja villages. Even a random elite Jonin from one of the 5 great villages could throw Yugakure into chaos. In reality, the control of Yugakure had always been in Konoha's hands, which was why when Kumogakure invaded the Land of Hot Water, Konoha had to retaliate. And if Amigakure were to ally with Yugakure, or even take control of the Land of Hot Water, it would certainly draw the attention of both Konoha and Kumogakure, putting Amigakure under pressure from both sides. Seeing Yahiko and Konan lost in thought, Byakuya chuckled and said, "I was just offering a suggestion. The Akatsuki isn't ready to take on Yugakure just yet. After all, we haven't even conquered Kusagakure, Takigakure, or the Land of Rice Fields." Hearing that Byakuya was only joking, Yahiko sighed in relief. However, when he heard that Byakuya had ambitions toward the smaller nations surrounding Amigakure, he was taken aback. Kusagakure and the land of rice fields were one thing. There had always been conflict between Kusagakure and Amagakure, and the land of rice fields didn't even have a ninja village. But Takigakure's strength was one of the best among the smaller ninja villages. Although its ninjas weren't often seen, Takigakure had the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails. After taking a deep breath, Yahiko said, "Byakuya, the Akatsuki is a peace-loving organization. You can't keep targeting the surrounding ninja villages for attack. They don't pose a threat to us anymore. Yahiko, I've always loved peace. As long as they don't provoke the organization, I certainly won't retaliate. But if they ask for help, we can't just turn down their request, can we?" After a brief pause, Byakuya continued, "Yahiko, I've already arranged a meeting between you and the leader of Yugakure. After talking with him, you might change your mind. Don't forget, the Akatsuki was born because of the wars between the major powers. Should we now avoid Yugakure just because we're afraid of offending Konoha and Kumogakure? Should we stop listening to their voices?" Yahiko was visibly shaken. After pondering for a moment, he nodded. He had many thoughts but, in the end, didn't reject Byakuya's arrangement. Byakuya was right, he had been too concerned about his relationship with Jiraiya-sensei, forgetting the reason for the Akatsuki's existence. It was true that Jiraiya-sensei had been a mentor to Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato, imparting his knowledge and ideas about peace. However, Jiraiya's concept of peace was framed from Konoha's perspective, always prioritizing Konoha's interests. When Jiraiya took them in, Konoha had been actively attacking Amagakure. After successfully convincing Yahiko to meet with the leader of Yugakure, Byakuya's lips curled into a faint smile. His motivations were not so altruistic. Everything he did was aimed at increasing his own strength to face the future crises of the ninja world. If he could forge an alliance with Yugakure, or even bring them under his control, the Akatsuki would gain a significant boost in power. With that, Byakuya's own strength could surpass the average Kage level, reaching the initial stages of a Super Kage. Returning to his room, Byakuya suddenly sensed something. He formed a hand seal and glanced at the floor. With a puff of white smoke, a scroll appeared on the ground. Byakuya picked it up, recognizing it as something sent by Kabuto Yakushi, containing a brief piece of intelligence. Orochimaru had defected from Konoha and was now an S-rank missing nin, wanted by Konoha. After reading the scroll, Byakuya burned it and tossed the ashes into the pond, watching as they floated and eventually sank into the water. He wasn't particularly surprised by Orochimaru's defection. Orochimaru, more of a mad scientist than even the second Hokage, could never have stayed in Konoha for long. First, Orochimaru liked experimenting on his comrades, which violated the will of fire. Second, he had no qualms about breaking taboos and was obsessed with researching forbidden jutsu. The only surprising thing for Byakuya was that Orochimaru's defection had happened earlier than expected, likely due to Byakuya's own interference, which had disrupted the Akatsuki's future. But even with changes in the timeline, this wasn't a big issue for him. What intrigued him more was where Orochimaru had fled. If he could recruit Orochimaru into the Akatsuki, Byakuya wondered what kind of reward such a move would bring him. For now, he planned to keep an eye on the black market, hoping to catch wind of Orochimaru's whereabouts. He also remembered that the land of rice fields, near Amagakure, would later become the location where Orochimaru established the Hidden Sound Village after defecting from the Akatsuki. Though Orochimaru had yet to join the Akatsuki in this altered timeline, it wouldn't be surprising if he had already taken an interest in the land of rice fields. Pulling his thoughts back to the present, Byakuya began to ponder how to respond to Kabuto. While it was crucial to use the peace talks between Konoha and Kumogakure to elevate Amagakure's position, cultivating Kabuto was also an important task. Kabuto, a ninja who lacked love and care, could easily be swayed to follow Byakuya with just a little attention and periodic displays of concern. That would ensure Kabuto's loyalty. Chapter 205, Three-Party Talks. On the night before the official talks, Jiraiya received a message from the Hokage building. After carefully reading the contents of the letter, Jiraiya's expression became extremely serious. He slammed his hand hard on the table, leaving a clear palm print on its surface. A few days earlier, he had reported intelligence to the village, seeking support from them. Unexpectedly, during these few days, a major event occurred in the village. His close friend, Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin, attacked fellow comrades in the village and chose to defect. Jiraiya couldn't understand why Orochimaru would attack his comrades or why he chose to flee. If he weren't the current commander of the Kumogakure front line, he would have abandoned his responsibility to search for Orochimaru and question him about why he left the village. Shikaku and others noticed the expression on Jiraiya's face, looking puzzled. Jiraiya sighed lightly and then said, "The third Hokage sent word. They cannot send any more reinforcements to the front line because Orochimaru has left the village." Orochimaru left the village? The Konoha ninjas present were slightly stunned, and they quickly grasped what Jiraiya meant. Orochimaru's departure was likely a euphemism, and the reality was probably that Orochimaru had defected. But why would Orochimaru leave the village? Seeing the confusion on their faces, Jiraiya handed them the letter. After passing it around, their expressions gradually became serious. There were two main reasons for Orochimaru's defection. One was that he attacked comrades in the village and stole their blood, and the second was conducting secret would-release experiments, violating the village's laws. In any case, Orochimaru had now become a rogue ninja and was wanted by the village. After learning this, Shikaku and the others became visibly more worried, deeply concerned about the future of the village. Orochimaru wasn't just a powerful ninja, he was one of the Sannin, with at least dozens of ninjas under his command, representing a force no less significant than any major ninja clan. After Orochimaru's defection, even if these ninjas didn't follow him, they would be watched and interrogated due to their association with him, further depleting the already scarce strength of the village. Where some were worried, others were pleased. Orochimaru's defection was a terrible event for Jiraiya and the Inoshikacho trio, but for the Uchiha clan, it was good news. Orochimaru's defection meant the Hokage faction's power had been further weakened. With this shift in the balance of power, the strength of the Uchiha clan had come very close to that of the Hokage faction, significantly increasing the chance of a Uchiha becoming the next Hokage. Despite feeling ecstatic inside, Fugaku still wore a concerned expression and said, "Jiraiya-sama, what should we do next?" Jiraiya looked at Fugaku helplessly and said, "We can only take one step at a time. If we can't gain more benefits, we must at least ensure peace with Kumogakure." Hearing Jiraiya's sigh, the Konoha ninjas present fell silent. They knew Jiraiya was speaking the truth. With Orochimaru's defection, Konoha really didn't have much leverage left to fight for the Land of Hot Water's interests. If not for Amagakure's forced intervention, Konoha might even lose this war. The next morning, the three-party talks between Konoha, Kumogakure, and Amagakure were held in the meeting room of Yogakure. As the host of the talks, the leader of Yogakure sat in the main seat, waiting for the representatives of each side to arrive and discuss how to handle the future of the Land of Hot Water. At this thought, the leader of Yogakure felt a sense of sadness. He was the leader of the village, and the meeting would determine the fate of his nation, yet the main players in this discussion were not him, but Konoha and Kumogakure. This was the sorrow of a small country. In times of peace, it could enjoy prosperity and development, but in times of war, it could only serve as a chessboard for the major ninja villages. With a light sigh, Yogakure leader glanced at the area reserved for Amagakure, his eyes filled with a hint of envy. Amagakure was also a small village, outside of the 5 great ninja villages. In terms of land size and economy, Amagakure was not as well off as Yogakure, yet it had the strength to contend with the major villages. Not long ago, it had even forcibly halted the war between Konoha and Kumogakure. If only Yogakure had that kind of power. Before long, representatives from Konohadakure, Kumogakure, and Amagakure appeared outside the conference room. There was no change in the Kumogakure delegation. It was still led by the 4th Raikage, followed by Killer Bee, Darui, and other elite jonin of Kumogakure. Konoha's delegation was also still led by Jiraiya, accompanied by Fugaku, Hizashi, and others. Upon seeing this, the 4th Raikage frowned and addressed Jiraiya bluntly. "Jiraiya, it seems Konoha has little interest in this negotiation. Not only did the third Hokage not come, but even the other elders didn't show up. Could it be that they are too old to walk anymore? Hearing this, Jiraiya stopped and replied, "My teacher is in excellent health, so there's no need for the Raikage to worry." As for why he didn't attend the talks, perhaps he didn't think the matter was all that important. Under normal circumstances, Jiraiya would never say something like this. However, before arriving, Shikaku had told him that he must maintain a tough stance to avoid arousing suspicion from the Raikage side. They needed to sign a treaty favorable to Konoha before the news of Orochimaru's defection spread. The fourth Raikage stared at Jiraiya for a moment before responding coldly, "Jiraiya, you seem quite confident. I hope you can maintain that confidence during the negotiations. Hanzo of the Salamander may have forcibly stopped our war, but that doesn't mean he's on your side. The next village to wage war against you might very well be Amagakure." This remark caused the atmosphere between Konohagakure and Kumogakure to become tense. The fourth Raikage wasn't wrong. The war between Konohagakure and Kumogakure had been forcibly halted, and although both sides were now considering a peace agreement, they had mobilized a large number of ninjas. It wasn't impossible for the conflict to reignite at any moment. Just then, the ninjas from Amagakure arrived outside the meeting room. Having overheard the Raikage's words, Byakuya spoke with a light tone, "Raikage-sama, why are you stirring up trouble between Amagakure and Konohagakure in my absence? Has the always honorable Raikage turned sly and deceitful? That doesn't seem to align with Kumogakure's usual style." The fourth Raikage glanced at Byakuya, uninterested in arguing with this sharp-tongued individual. As for Byakuya's remark about Kumogakure's honorable ways, the Raikage took it as a veiled insult. After all, Kumogakure had a reputation for rogue behavior. They had once kidnapped Kushina Uzumaki during a time of peace and had even destroyed a small country in their pursuit of chakra techniques. Chapter 206, The Meeting. After a moment of contemplation, the fourth Raikage spoke to Byakuya. "Byakuya, I'm just being honest. I definitely don't believe that Amagakure will firmly side with Konoha. Don't forget, Konoha invaded the Land of Rain over 20 years ago, while Kumogakure has no grudges or conflicts with Amagakure." Hearing this, Byakuya fell into deep thought, then nodded. The Raikage-sama makes a valid point. Konoha did indeed invade the Land of Rain. So, what should Amagakure do next? Faced with Byakuya's question, the fourth Raikage struggled to maintain his composure. He wasn't sure if Byakuya was playing dumb or deliberately trying to frustrate him, but his original intent of stirring up conflict between Konoha and Amagakure had clearly failed. Left with no choice, he stiffly ordered his subordinates, "Killer Bee, Mabui, let's go inside first." After the fourth Raikage left, Byakuya approached Jiraiya with a light smile and said, "Jiraiya, don't fall for the Raikage's scheme. The friendship between Amagakure and Konoha will last for many years, just as strong as the bond between the Uchiha and Senju clans." The bond between the Uchiha and Senju. Jiraiya's eyes widened. Byakuya's words were full of irony, and it seemed like he was actually provoking the relationship between the Uchiha and the Hokage faction. After all, whether the friendship between the Uchiha and Senju was truly strong was still an unknown. Before Jiraiya could respond, Byakuya cheerfully walked into the conference room, with Yahiko following closely behind, saying to Jiraiya, "Jiraiya-sensei, Byakuya can be a bit childish sometimes, please be patient with him." Jiraiya sighed helplessly but could only nod and wave his hand, leading his subordinates into the conference room. With all the participating shinobi gathered, the meeting officially began. Jiraiya took the documents from Shikaku and showed the seal of the Fire Daimyo, speaking slowly. "The Konoha side has received authorization from the Fire Daimyo. Has your village received similar authorization?" The fourth Raikage nodded and then presented a document with the red seal of the Lightning Daimyo, saying, "Kumogakure has received full authorization from the Lightning Daimyo to represent the entire Land of Lightning." Seeing this, Byakuya secretly chuckled, marveling at the strange system of one country and one village in the ninja world. The 5 great shinobi villages may be the military forces of the 5 great nations, but they do not fully represent them. For actions like declaring war or holding talks, they require authorization from the daimyos. At first glance, this system seems logical, but upon closer inspection, it feels rather bizarre. Why would ordinary daimyos cooperate with ninjas who wield extraordinary powers, and why would they nominally outrank the ninja villages? Is it because of their noble bloodlines, or is there another reason? Even in terms of bloodline, the clans with Kekkei Genkai far outclass the daimyos. Clans like the Uchiha and Hyuga have literally inherited the bloodlines of the gods. In contrast, smaller nations like the Land of Rain, which lack a daimyo, seem even more peculiar within this system. After the formalities were completed, Jiraiya turned to the fourth Raikage and said, "Since last March, your village has occupied the Land of Hot Water and launched an attack on the Land of Fire. Konoha's demand is that Kumogakure compensate Konoha for the war and withdraw from the Land of Hot Water." Hearing this, Yahiko nodded and asked the fourth Raikage, "Raikage-sama, is what Jiraiya-sama said true?" "There is no dispute about our attack on the Land of Fire." The fourth Raikage paused before continuing. "However, the claim that we've occupied the Land of Hot Water is a baseless accusation from Konoha. It's completely unfounded. First, Kumogakure did not engage in any conflict with Yugakure. Second, we entered the Land of Hot Water under the support of a treaty, not through illegal invasion." After finishing, the fourth Raikage clapped his hands, signaling Mabui to present a document. "This is a request from Yugakure for Kumogakure to station troops, sealed with the official red stamp of Yugakure. It does indeed document the agreement for troop deployment." Yahiko remained silent, instead taking the document and handing it to the leader of Yugakure. The leader of Yugakure took the document, glanced over it, and nodded, saying, "This is indeed our Yugakure's seal." Hearing this, the fourth Raikage smiled with satisfaction. Kumogakure dispatched troops to drive out Konoha's shinobi from the Land of Hot Water, and the subsequent conflict near the Land of Fire is merely a continuation of that action. Jiraiya's expression changed slightly as he looked at the leader of Yugakure, then at the fourth Raikage. At this moment, Shikaku couldn't help but interject, "Leader of Yugakure, may I ask if this agreement was signed between you and Kumogakure? I recall you also signed a similar agreement with us in Konoha. If you signed two agreements simultaneously, can Konoha assume that the Land of Hot Water has betrayed the alliance?" The leader of Yugakure's expression shifted slightly, and he replied, "It is true that the agreement with Kumogakure exists, but that was signed by the previous leader. However, that leader betrayed the village, so that agreement is now void." Shikaku smiled and said, "Raikage-sama, did you hear that? This agreement was signed by the previous leader, and an agreement signed by a traitor cannot be valid." Upon hearing this, the fourth Raikage replied nonchalantly, "I see." However, Kumogakure was not informed of this, which makes it a unilateral breach of contract by Yugakure against Kumogakure. I still remember the penalty for breaching an agreement. It is to open several ports within the Land of Hot Water. I hope Yugakure will deliver those ports promptly." Shikaku felt a surge of joy. The fourth Raikage seemed not to intend to continue the war. The requirement from the village for this meeting was to sign a peace agreement. Even sacrificing some interests of the Land of Fire wouldn't be out of the question, especially since Orochimaru's defection had such a significant impact on the village. Now, the fourth Raikage was only demanding a few trade ports, allowing Konoha to maintain its treaty with Yugakure, which was already very favorable for Konoha. However, since there was room for negotiation, they needed to strive for more benefits for the village. Thinking along these lines, Shikaku spoke up, "Raikage-sama, that agreement is already void. Moreover, Yugakure and Konoha have similar cooperation, so it is likely that we cannot grant those ports to you." While Shikaku and the fourth Raikage discussed the allocation of ports within the Land of Hot Water, the leader of Yugakure remained indifferent. This scene was incredibly surreal and absurd. Under normal circumstances, the leader of Yugakure would feel utterly hopeless, but today he had other options. The leader of Yugakure turned to look at Yahiko, who coincidentally met his gaze. After exchanging looks, Yahiko spoke, "Shikaku, Raikage-sama, shouldn't we hear what Yugakure has to say?" Chapter 207, Pressing Issues. Shikaku, Reikage-sama, shouldn't we hear what Yugakure has to say? At these words, both Shikaku and the fourth Reikage were taken aback. When did the negotiations between Konoha and Kumogakure require the input of Yugakure? Although the land of hot water behind Yugakure is not small in area, its overall strength is negligible. If it weren't for the need for a buffer zone between the land of fire and the land of lightning, Yugakure would have long been divided between Konoha and Kumogakure. In fact, if this meeting hadn't been held in Yugakure, the leader of Yugakure wouldn't even have qualified to attend. However, due to the strength of Amegakure, both Konoha and Kumogakure paused their discussions, turning to the leader of Yugakure seated at the head of the table, waiting for him to speak. They were also curious to see which side the leader of Yugakure favored. Under the watchful eyes of the fourth Reikage and Jiraiya, the leader of Yugakure glanced around anxiously, knowing that what he was about to say would surely offend both Konoha and Kumogakure, drawing hostility from both sides. But if he did not take a stand, Yugakure would forever remain in the shadow of the great nations. Taking a deep breath, the leader of Yugakure began, "Shikaku-sama, Reikage-sama, Yugakure has indeed signed an alliance treaty with both Kumogakure and Konoha, but it is you who first violated the treaty. Yugakure does not require compensation from either Konoha or Kumogakure, but we ask that you withdraw your troops from the land of hot water." The leader's words brought expressions of surprise to the faces of both the fourth Reikage and Shikaku, followed by frowns. The other shinobi present were also taken aback. How dare Yugakure do this? Had they not considered the consequences of offending both Konoha and Kumogakure? Even if Konoha and Kumogakure did not send forces to attack the land of hot water, they could easily subdue Yugakure with just a few Umbu teams, launching a military operation at any time. After a moment of thought, the shinobi present gradually realized this and turned to Yahiko, who was not far away. Given the courage of the leader of Yugakure, he would never dare to break away from the control of Konoha and Kumogakure, but if he had the backing of Amegakure, that would be a different story. While the overall strength of Amegakure may not be comparable to the 5 great shinobi villages, its top-tier combat power could certainly rival them, especially in this conflict between Kumogakure and Konoha, which could easily influence the outcome. Thinking of this, the fourth Reikage's expression darkened as he said, "Leader of Yugakure, are you sure you do not need Kumogakure's protection? Do you really think you have the ability to protect the land of hot water?" Under the pressure from the fourth Reikage, the leader of Yugakure forced himself to respond, "The war between your villages has already brought devastation to the land of hot water. So, we do not want to sacrifice for other shinobi villages any longer." The leader's statement undoubtedly stripped Kumogakure of its last shred of dignity. If it weren't for the concern of losing respect, the fourth Reikage might have acted immediately in the conference room, but for now, he could only exert pressure through his gaze and demeanor. At this moment, Byakuya looked at the fourth Reikage and said with a mocking expression, "Reikage-sama, it is not appropriate to openly threaten the leader of Yugakure in front of everyone since he has the right to make his own choices." The fourth Reikage retorted bluntly, "This is likely because your Amegakure promised them something, isn't it?" Byakuya nodded slightly and replied, "Reikage-sama is indeed quite astute. Then I will be straightforward. We are not interested in the war between Konoha and Kumogakure, but the conflict cannot continue on the territory of the land of hot water." The fourth Reikage sneered, "That sounds nice, but why did you join Konoha previously and kill the two-tailed Jinchuriki from my village? Kumogakure will not forget that debt." That was because Kumogakure was the aggressor, and Jiraiya paid a high price. Seeing Byakuya and the fourth Reikage getting into a heated argument, Yahiko quickly stepped in, saying, "Reikage-sama, please forgive Byakuya's offense. We genuinely want Konoha and Kumogakure to coexist peacefully." During the days leading up to this meeting, our Akatsuki organization carefully studied the reasons behind the past wars between Konoha and Kumogakure. It always boils down to the struggle for control over the land of hot water, fearing that the control of the land of hot water would threaten both the land of fire and the land of lightning. If Yugakure can free itself from the influence of Kumogakure and Konoha and maintain neutrality, the war between Konoha and Kumogakure will not erupt. Upon hearing Yahiko's words, the fourth Reikage's expression softened considerably. Yahiko's expression was quite similar to Byakuya's, clearly indicating a coordinated front in front of the Raikage. However, if Amagakure insisted on intervening, Kumogakure would really lack the strength to reignite the war. Jiraiya, on the other hand, fell into deep thought as he carefully considered Yahiko's words. Yahiko was correct. Most of the conflicts between Konoha and Kumogakure stem from the issues in the Land of Hot Water. If the Land of Hot Water could maintain neutrality, it would be beneficial for both sides. Yahiko's realization of this point demonstrated his growth over the years, perhaps even surpassing his teacher. However, the third Hokage and the advisors would not easily accept this outcome, as they had long been unwilling to relinquish control over the Land of Hot Water. Controlling the Land of Hot Water would allow Konoha to effectively curb Kumogakure's expansion. But Konoha's attempts to control the Land of Hot Water were no different from Kumogakure's invasion. One was an overt invasion, while the other was merely a covert one. With this thought in mind, Jiraiya felt uncertain about how to continue the negotiations. After a soft sigh, he turned to Yahiko and the fourth Raikage, saying, "If Kumogakure is willing to withdraw its troops from the Land of Hot Water, then Konoha will also be willing to pull out." Upon hearing Jiraiya's concession, the ninjas present shifted their gazes towards the fourth Raikage. Under the scrutiny of so many eyes, even a powerful figure like the fourth Raikage felt immense pressure. Internally, he was reluctant to give up the benefits in the Land of Hot Water, nor did he want to withdraw his troops. After all, the Land of Hot Water was virtually the only direction for Kumogakure's expansion. Other directions were either across vast oceans or permafrost-covered wastelands, which could not sustain Kumogakure's growth. Currently, Kumogakure's system relied heavily on external expansion. Failing to engage in war would easily lead to internal strife, as evidenced by the previous rebellion of Kin and Jin. Those two had attacked the meeting venue due to dissatisfaction with Kumogakure's treaty with Konoha, resulting in the death of the second Raikage and subsequently the second Hokage of Konoha. After a prolonged silence, the fourth Raikage glanced at his companion, Killer Bee, then surveyed the ninjas from Konoha, Yugakure, and Amagakure, and slowly said, "If Konoha truly intends to withdraw its troops, then Kumogakure can also withdraw from the Land of Hot Water." However, to ensure the security of Kumogakure at the borders, neither Konoha nor Amagakure will be allowed to station troops within the Land of Hot Water. Chapter 208 Expansion of the Akatsuki Organization. With the efforts of Byakuya, Yahiko, and Jiraiya, both Kumogakure and Konohagakure agreed to withdraw their troops from the Land of Hot Water. As long as Yugakure remains neutral and does not ally with other ninja villages, both Konohagakure and Kumogakure will not take the initiative to attack the Land of Hot Water. Upon learning this outcome, the leader of Yugakure was very excited. After the talks had just concluded, the leader found Yahiko at the inn where the Rain Ninja were staying, shaking Yahiko's hand and saying, "Lord Yahiko, I truly thank you for your efforts. If it weren't for you, even if Kumogakure and Konohagakure stopped the war, they would still have acted against the Land of Hot Water." Yahiko also appeared very excited, having realized his childhood dream of mediating a war between great nations. After regaining his focus, Yahiko said to the leader of Yugakure, "This is what we should do. Both Amagakure and Yugakure are small ninja countries. If we cannot unite, we will only be harassed by the 5 great ninja villages." The leader of Yugakure nodded, fully aware of the difficulties faced by small nations. However, there is no free lunch in the world. The reason Amagakure was willing to help Yugakure was not only because they were both small countries but also for the resources and market within the Land of Hot Water. This point had already been discussed during their last meeting. Compared to Konohagakure, which often demands garrison rights, and in name only acts as allies while treating the Land of Hot Water as a vassal state, Amagakure has merely rented a few ports. As for the ambitions of Kumogakure, they were even more outrageous, seeking to directly annex the Land of Hot Water. Just as the leader of Yugakure and Yahiko were engaging in mutual flattery, Byakuya walked over and smiled, saying, "Hey Yahiko, did you forget to mention a condition to the leader of Yugakure?" "Byakuya-senpai, what else is there?" The leader of Yugakure was taken aback. He respected Byakuya for his strength but wondered why Byakuya suddenly had an additional condition. Could it be that he picked the wrong side this time, and the ambitions of Amagakure were actually greater than those of Kanahadakure and Kumogakure? Byakuya approached the leader of Yugakure and smiled, saying, "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. I just want to invite you and Yugakure to join our Akatsuki organization." Akatsuki? The leader of Yugakure looked even more confused. He had heard of the Akatsuki's name and knew that both Yahiko and Byakuya were once members, but wasn't the Akatsuki a subordinate organization of Amagakure? Seeing the leader's confusion, Byakuya chuckled and said, "Lord Leader of Yugakure, you are not thinking that the Akatsuki is a subordinate organization of Amagakure, are you? In fact, Amagakure is a subordinate organization of the Akatsuki. The goals of the Akatsuki are not limited to one country or one village. We are here to achieve peace in the ninja world. When Hanzo the Salamander tried to stop us, we defeated him, and the war between Kumogakure and Kanahadakure has also ceased because of our intervention. If you are willing to lead Yugakure to join the Akatsuki, I can consider protecting you." After saying this, Byakuya formed hand seals, and a small sapling burst forth from the ground, rapidly growing to fill the entire room. Would release. The legendary would release. Seeing this scene, the leader of Yugakure was wide-eyed, suspecting that he was under a Jinjutsu. While would release was merely a bloodline limit, the last user of would release was the first Hokage, who had pacified the warring states, and from then on, would release carried a special significance. Yahiko was also somewhat surprised. Although he had long suspected that Byakuya had mastered would release, this was the first time he had seen Byakuya use it. In the previous battle with Hanzo, Byakuya would have never been able to defeat the demigod of the ninja world and force Hanzo to surrender without mastering such a secret technique. However, he couldn't quite understand why Byakuya wanted the leader of Yugakure to join the Akatsuki. After a moment, the leader of Yugakure finally recovered from his shock. He looked at Byakuya with a newfound respect, and his tone became even more respectful. "Lord Byakuya, was that would release you just used?" Byakuya smiled casually and said, "You have good insight, you recognize that I used would release, so you should understand its power." Of course, of course." After a brief pause, the leader of Yugakure curiously asked, "However, Lord Byakuya, since you have mastered would release, why are you still in the Land of Rain?" "What I mean is, the territory of the Land of Rain is not worthy of you. The resources of the Land of Rain are not worthy of Byakuya." This was not flattery from the leader of Yugakure but his genuine thoughts. Byakuya could contend with the fourth Raikage in a short time even without using would release, which undoubtedly proves that he possesses power on par with the 5 Kage. Coupled with his would release that is extremely effective against tailed beasts, even without the power of the Sage of the Six Paths, Byakuya could be referred to as a demigod. Byakuya stared at the leader of Yugakure and retorted, "I'm a ninja who loves peace and dislikes killing. If I were to join other ninja villages, what would happen to your Yugakure?" Upon hearing this, the leader of Yugakure fell silent. He did not believe Byakuya's claim of loving peace. According to records from the black market, during the recent war between Kanahadakure and Kumogakure, Byakuya had eliminated dozens of ninjas. Even the information regarding the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails was vaguely connected to him. Compared to Byakuya, even the crazies from Kirigakure and Sunagakure seemed quite amiable. Byakuya continued, all right, you can now make a decision on whether or not to join the Akatsuki." The leader of Yugakure no longer hesitated and nodded, saying, "I am willing to bring Yugakure into the Akatsuki. However, are there any specific rules or regulations within the organization?" Byakuya fell into thought for a moment and then said, "Aside from prohibiting mutual killings, there are no special regulations. For specific questions, you can ask Lord Yahiko. I'm not good at managing ninja villages." Seeing Byakuya pass the responsibility to him, Yahiko could only accept it with a forced smile. Since Byakuya became the leader of the Akatsuki, he had dedicated all his attention to the organization, leaving all matters concerning Amagakure to Yahiko. Along with Nagato, who loved civil engineering, and Konan, who enjoyed making money, it seemed that without Byakuya's input, Amagakure and the Akatsuki would likely face major troubles soon. After a light sigh, Yahiko turned to the leader of Yugakure and said, "Let's continue our previous discussion. There are still many areas where Amigakure and Yugakure can collaborate." Having intimidated the leader of Yugakure and facilitated his joining the Akatsuki, Byakuya didn't linger and simply found a quiet room to wait. Before long, a familiar electronic notification sound echoed in Byakuya's mind. "Yugakure has joined the Akatsuki. You have gained basic water release, basic fire release, basic earth release. Yugakure has joined the Akatsuki. You have acquired the forbidden techniques of the evil god cult." Chapter 209, Forbidden Techniques of the Evil God and Haiden. Yugakure has joined the Akatsuki. You have gained basic water release, basic fire release, basic earth release. Yugakure has joined the Akatsuki. You have acquired the forbidden techniques of the evil god cult. After hearing the system notification in his ears, Byakuya frowned. Yugakure was just a minor ninja village, so it was normal for the rewards to be less impressive than those from Amigakure. After all, if Yugakure had any real secret techniques, they would have long been snatched by the 5 great ninja villages. He was already quite satisfied with being able to supplement his ninjutsu and increase his chakra. However, why would recruiting Yugakure result in a reward of the evil god cult's techniques? Could it be that Yugakure had been flirting with the evil god cult all along? This was completely inconsistent with Yugakure's atmosphere of comfort and relaxation. After all, in Byakuya's memory, the evil god cult was a sect devoted to sacrifices, where the more painful the death of the offering, the more favor they earned from the evil god. In the original timeline of the Akatsuki, there was also Haiden, a member of the evil god cult. Returning his thoughts to the present, Byakuya accepted the forbidden techniques of the evil god cult, which contained a technique called Curse Technique, death-controlling possessed blood along with its accompanying techniques. Byakuya was not unfamiliar with this technique. It was Haiden's signature technique. As long as he could obtain the blood of the corresponding ninja, he could perform the technique and harm his enemies through self-harm. Ninja like Asuma, the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, and the Seven-Tails Jinchuriki all died under this technique. After carefully reviewing the conditions for performing the curse technique, death-controlling possessed blood, Byakuya's mouth twitched slightly. This forbidden technique of the evil god cult was quite similar to the Hyuga's gentle fist. It was useful but not particularly powerful. First of all, to use curse technique, death-controlling possessed blood, one must first obtain the enemy's blood. This step isn't particularly difficult, as it is easy to obtain blood during battle, and there are also various underhanded means. However, to perform curse technique, death-controlling possessed blood, one must first set up a ritual array and stand within it to cast the technique. The enemy has ample time to destroy the ritual array, rendering this technique ineffective. Furthermore, this technique has a range limit, and if it exceeds that range, its effects will also fail. The most demanding aspect is the cost of performing this technique. To curse the enemy, one must inflict the same amount of harm upon oneself and, after the ritual is over, self-harm for half an hour to please the evil god. All these conditions combined require immense courage and an undying body to perform curse technique, death-controlling possessed blood. No wonder the evil god cult possesses such powerful techniques. After developing for so many years, they still hide near Yugakure. What normal ninja would perform such rituals? Even their followers might not be able to do it. Only Haiden, who had undergone forbidden experiments to gain his immortal body, could barely use it. Complaints aside, Byakuya still noted the techniques of the evil god cult down. Although this technique was almost useless, it could still serve as a surprise attack, showcasing decent effects in critical moments. Stepping out of the room, Byakuya strolled through the streets of Yugakure, looking for something interesting to join. After this meeting, Kanagakure and Kumogakure would surely be seething with anger and might clash at any moment. When that time came, he could step in to mediate the conflict between the two sides. Unfortunately, Byakuya did not see many Kanagakure or Kumogakure ninjas. The few that appeared quickly fled upon noticing him. Am I really that scary? Byakuya shrugged, revealing an expression of helplessness. Just then, Byakuya sensed unusual movements outside the village. Several chakra signatures at the level of Jonin were erupting, prompting him to hurry over to see what was going on. Before long, Byakuya arrived at the battle site. He saw Kakuzu and Sasori, both dressed in the Akatsuki's signature cloaks, surrounding a seemingly mentally unstable young man. Despite being covered in blood, the young man's face radiated arrogance, as if he were intoxicated by the pain. Could this person be Haiden? After silently reciting a few words in his heart, Byakuya approached Kakuzu and Sasori, asking, "Kakuzu, Sasori, didn't the organization instruct all members not to cause trouble in Ugakure? Ugakure is a village we're trying to recruit." Sasori snorted coldly and replied, "This guy provoked us first. He showed up asking us to join some cleansing cult and was babbling about sacrifices and other crazy talk. If it weren't for the fact that this guy has no bounty, I would have taken his head for a reward already." Kakuzu nodded and then seemed to recall something, saying, "But this kid can really take a beating. Even after I pierced through his body, he kept on fighting." Feigning surprise, Byakuya exclaimed, "Does that mean he has an immortal body just like you, Kakuzu-senpai? Haven't you tried to recruit him?" Kakuzu remained silent, seemingly realizing he had indeed forgotten about that. At that moment, Haiden noticed Byakuya and shouted, "Hey, kid over there. Do you want to join the evil god cult? Just sacrifice yourself, and you can embrace Lord Jashin." Byakuya couldn't help but roll his eyes at Haiden's words. What kind of god is called an evil god? Are you trying to tarnish your own god's reputation? The evil lord is the evil god, who never pretends. Byakuya sneered and replied, "Since your evil lord enjoys sacrifices so much, why don't you offer yourself as a sacrifice?" Haiden scratched his head and grinned widely. "I want to offer a sacrifice to the evil god too, but I have an immortal body, so it's not that easy for me to die. Plus, staying alive helps me please the evil god better." "I see. But I have one more question for you. Since the evil god loves pain and sacrifices so much, why doesn't he sacrifice himself?" Well, upon hearing this, Haiden fell into deep thought, pondering why the evil god wouldn't sacrifice himself. If the evil lord truly loved pain and sacrifices, then the evil god should be the first to offer himself, right? Could it be that the evil god doesn't really enjoy pain and sacrifice? Seeing this scene, Byakuya, Kakuzu, and Sasori all looked at Haiden as if he were a fool. After thinking for a long time without arriving at an answer, Haiden finally heard the laughter from Byakuya and the others and, in frustration, shouted, "Let me ask you one last time, do you want to join the evil god cult or not?" Byakuya gently shook his head and said, "Sorry, I have no intention of joining the evil god cult, nor do my two subordinates. I was just teasing you." Haiden's expression darkened immediately, and he swung his scythe, charging toward Byakuya. Byakuya didn't make a move, he simply said calmly, "Kakuzu, Sasori, this guy is up to you. Isn't he supposed to be immortal? You don't need to hold back." Chapter 210, The Ambitions of Uchiha and Hyuga. Under the full force of Kakuzu and Sasori, Haiden was defeated within a few exchanges. During this time, he managed to obtain some of Kakuzu's blood, but before he could perform the sacrificial ritual, Sasori forcibly interrupted him. His immortal body was firmly pressed to the ground, rendering him unable to move. When facing elite Jonin-level enemies, Haiden's immortality could serve as a surprise tactic, but against shadow-level powerhouses, he could only be unilaterally crushed. Unfortunately for him, Byakuya was aware of Haiden's intel. Kakuzu and Sasori had immunity to the evil god cult's rituals, leaving Haiden lying helplessly on the ground in frustration. Crouching in front of Haiden, Byakuya poked him with the hilt of his sword and said, "Haiden, it seems your immortal body isn't all that impressive, huh?" Haiden glared fiercely at Byakuya, unwilling to back down. "You're only relying on your two subordinates. Without them, you're not my opponent at all." Kakuzu and Sasori exchanged glances, silently agreeing that they were indeed the subordinates. Haiden continued to boast, "Kid, if you have the guts, kill me. Otherwise, once I leave here, I'll do everything in my power to kill you." Byakuya's expression grew serious as he said earnestly, "Are you really going to kill me? In that case, I'll just have to pour you into cement and sink you into the sea. I hope you can withstand hundreds of years of solitude and torment." After saying this, Byakuya turned to Kakuzu and Sasori, looking for cement and sand, ready to bury Haiden alive. Seeing this, Kakuzu and Sasori came to help, but their gazes remained fixed on Haiden. Especially Sasori, who looked at Haiden with great interest. Noticing Sasori's gaze, Byakuya said lightly, "Don't get your hopes up. Haiden's immortal body isn't invincible. As long as we seal his body in different places, what threat does he pose, even if he's still alive?" Pausing for a moment, Byakuya continued, "Also, Sasori, don't you think his immortal body is not much different from your puppet body? The difference is that you're a puppet, while he's flesh and blood." Sasori nodded in agreement but wondered how Byakuya knew about his plans to modify his body into a puppet. At this moment, Kakuzu had gathered the necessary materials, and the three returned to Haiden's side, preparing to seal him in a cement pillar. Seeing the cement pillar, Haiden still held his ground. But when the cement was piled up to his chest, Haiden finally felt a sense of fear. He wasn't afraid of dying, but he dreaded dying alone in solitude, especially since his immortality wasn't genuine. If he went without food for a few months, his immortal body could also starve to death from malnutrition. "I was wrong. What do you want from me? As long as you don't sink me into the sea, I'm willing to do anything." Upon hearing this, a smile crept onto Byakuya's lips. "Well then, welcome to the Akatsuki. However, before you join, you need to take us to meet the evil god cult. Do you want to meet the evil lord?" Haiden was somewhat puzzled but agreed to Byakuya's terms, thinking that with the strength of the evil lord, he could definitely handle these troublesome ninjas. In the reception hall of Yugakure, the Jonin from Konohadakure gathered together, and the atmosphere felt somewhat heavy. A few hours earlier, during the multi-party negotiations, they had successfully represented Konoha and Kumogakure, securing a temporary peace for the village. However, they were not very satisfied with the outcome of the talks. Before the war began, Yugakure was an ally of Konoha, providing raw materials and markets for the Land of Fire, and serving as a buffer zone between Konoha and Kumogakure, making it strategically significant. However, after this round of negotiations, Konoha lost its ally in Yugakure and, along with it, the northeastern barrier. Fortunately, Kumogakure also did not gain control over Yugakure, and Yugakure promised to remain neutral, refusing to take sides between Konoha and Kumogakure. But this did not mean Konoha could rest easy in the northeast. Kumogakure could still launch attacks on the Land of Fire through the narrow border, or even directly raid the eastern coastline of the Land of Fire. Yugakure was not truly neutral, it had tilted towards Amagakure. Because the leader of Amagakure was a disciple of Jiraiya, they posed no immediate threat to Konoha. However, Amagakure's actions this time proved that they were not without ambition. While Amagakure and Konoha might be able to cooperate against Iwagakure and Kumogakure, once the village's interests were involved, Amagakure would not hesitate to stab Konoha in the back. But this was an unavoidable situation. Although Konoha still held the nominal title of the #1 ninja village, it was essentially a hollow shell. The successive departures and betrayals of the three legendary ninjas, along with the death of the fourth Hokage and his wife, had severely impacted the village. If things did not turn around soon, Konoha might not even be a match for Kumogakure, especially with Iwagakure and Kirigakure lurking behind. After a long silence, Jiraiya spoke up to break the tension. "The talks with Kumogakure have concluded. We have finally secured this hard-won peace. I have already reported the results to Lord Third. It won't be long before we can return." From his tone, it was clear that Jiraiya was not in a good mood. It wasn't solely because Konoha had lost its interest in Yugakure, but rather because Orochimaru's defection from the village had dealt him a severe blow. After all, with Orochimaru's departure, the once trio of legendary ninjas was now reduced to just him. Shikaku also appeared downcast. Although the war with Kumogakure had ended, there would be another war without gunpowder waiting for them back in the village. Despite Orochimaru's defection, the remnants of his followers still needed to be dealt with. After addressing these remnants, the vacant positions would spark competition among the various ninja clans. While it wouldn't directly affect the Inuzuka, Nara, and Akimichi clans, it would still bring them unnecessary troubles. In contrast to Jiraiya and Shikaku, Uchiha Fugaku was eager to return to the village. Konoha hadn't gained much from this war, but the Uchiha clan had achieved great glory. The elimination of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki and the near-equal showdown against the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki had turned Shisui into a prominent figure on the front lines. Upon returning to the village, the clans that had sidelined the Uchiha would finally understand just how powerful they were. With Shisui's support, Fugaku believed he could propose the candidacy for the 5th Hokage at the next meeting of the Upper Ninjas, ultimately winning the election and reaching the pinnacle of his life. Although Shisui found Fugaku's enthusiasm somewhat irritating, he couldn't help but entertain the thought of having an Uchiha as Hokage upon seeing the eager eyes of his clan members. But then Shisui recalled Byakuya's words and began to worry again. Would the Uchiha ultimately meet their demise because of his Mangekyo Sharingan? Should he heed Byakuya's advice and make preparations for the Uchiha? The Hyuga clan's ninjas were equally excited. In this war, the Hyuga clan had maximized the advantages of their Byakugan. The combination of the Byakugan's insight and their gentle fist style allowed them to defeat numerous Jonin from Kumogakure. The accolades they received ranked just below those of the Uchiha clan. As a result, ideas about participating in the Hokage election also sprouted in their minds. Although Hyuga Hizashi was from the branch family and didn't have the qualifications to become Hokage, he hoped his older brother, Hyuga Hayashi, could take the position. After all, the Hyuga clan was one of the major clans in the village and had never had a Hokage. Thus, at the same time, two major clans of Konoha began to entertain thoughts of running for Hokage. They both aimed to take a step forward during the time when Orochimaru's defection had left the Hokage's faction weakened. Chapter 211, The Means of the Third Hokage. Half a month later, Jiraiya led Konoha ninjas back to the village. As the heroes who ended the war, Jiraiya and the other ninjas were warmly welcomed by the villagers lining the streets. The villagers were indifferent to whether Konoha and the Land of Fire had lost anything in this war, nor did they care if the title of the first ninja village had been shaken. After experiencing the Third Shinobi World War, the Nine-Tails Night, and Kumogakure War, both the villagers and ninjas of Konoha were weary of war. They just wanted to enjoy the hard-earned peace and did not want their friends and family to step onto the battlefield again. After the welcome ceremony, Jiraiya and the others were invited to the conference room of the Hokage Tower. In stark contrast to the flowers and applause outside the Hokage Tower, the atmosphere in the conference room was unusually heavy, making it hard to breathe. Sensing the oppressive silence in the meeting room, Jiraiya quietly lowered his head. Shikaku, Fugaku, and others also felt the weight of the atmosphere, their faces darkening. This did not feel like a commendation meeting but rather like a deliberate scolding. In fact, Konoha had not lost in this war, but the difference was minimal. After glancing around, Danzo spoke calmly, "Jiraiya, I heard that during the signing of the peace agreement with Kumogakure, you abandoned the alliance with Yugakure and agreed to withdraw our troops from the Land of Hot Water?" Jiraiya nodded, unable to deny it. He had indeed withdrawn ninjas from the Land of Hot Water. After a pause, Danzo continued, "Jiraiya, do you know how much loss withdrawing from the Land of Hot Water will bring to the village? Other allies will also doubt the alliance after knowing about this. This is the most favorable condition I could negotiate. The village has not sent any follow-up troops to support. If you were at the front lines, Danzo, the situation would probably be even worse," Jiraiya said, glaring at Danzo. He was not afraid of the leader of Root. Danzo was left speechless. He hadn't made any significant contributions in this war. The newly recruited members of Root had not yet become combat-ready, and Tenzo was still in training. However, Jiraiya's public refusal to give him face would be remembered as an offense. Seeing that Jiraiya and Danzo were about to argue, Koharu Udating quickly stood up and said, "Danzo, Jiraiya's contribution this time is indeed very significant. If it weren't for him, this battlefield might have lasted for several more years." Hamiru Kato also nodded. Tsunade is right. Jiraiya's achievements are substantial. It would have been even better if we could maintain the treaty with Yugakure. Who would have thought that Amagakure's ambitions were so great? They actually took advantage of our conflict with Kumogakure to pull in Yugakure and sign an alliance. However, as long as Kumogakure doesn't take the land of hot water, they won't be able to pose a fatal threat to us. Jiraiya glanced at Danzo, who had been challenging him, and then at the two advisors who were trying to mediate. He somewhat understood the intentions of these old-timers. They were suppressing him on the surface, but in reality, they wanted to use this to undermine the significant contributions made by the Hyuga and Uchiha clans on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the third Hokage remained unresponsive, as if tacitly approving of Danzo and the others' actions. Why was this happening? Couldn't the village even manage clear rewards and punishments? Or was there really a faction of Hokage and other factions within the village? Couldn't there be a bit more leniency towards the Uchiha? With these thoughts, Jiraiya let out a soft sigh and suddenly felt that staying in the village was meaningless. For the rest of the time, Jiraiya attended the meeting in a distracted state, only nodding or shaking his head in response to others' questions. As the meeting progressed, Fugaku's mood worsened. If they were suppressing even Jiraiya, they certainly wouldn't mention the contributions of the Uchiha clan, which made him restless and unable to hold back his anger. At this moment, Danzo seemed to remember something and turned to Uchiha Fugaku, saying, "Fugaku, I heard that Shisui Uchiha has awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Is this true?" Upon mentioning the Mangekyo, Fugaku proudly replied, "Shisui has indeed awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, and he even defeated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. He held his own against the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki as well." "I see." Danzo nodded and then said, "Since Shisui defeated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, where is the Two-Tails Jinchuriki now? Why don't you use the Jinchuriki to exchange for concessions from Kumogakure?" Well, Fugaku frowned, as he also did not know the whereabouts of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. Seeing that Fugaku was reluctant to answer this question, Danzo spoke up, "Fugaku, you wouldn't say that the Two-Tails Jinchuriki is already dead, would you? The Two-Tails Jinchuriki shouldn't die so easily." Faced with Danzo's sudden attack, Jiraiya couldn't help but interject, "Danzo, the Two-Tails Jinchuriki is indeed dead. Byakuya can testify to that." "Byakuya?" Danzo retorted without holding back, "Can we trust an outsider? I suspect you Uchiha have secretly hidden the Two-Tails." Hearing this, Fugaku angrily said, "Danzo, don't slander us. Shisui would never hide the Two-Tails, and while the Uchiha were fighting to the death on the front lines, what were you and your Root doing?" Danzo spoke expressionlessly, "Who knows if you Uchiha are just pretending? Shisui could have awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan earlier or later, but he chose to do so now. Who knows what else he has used the Mangekyo for?" As these words were spoken, the other ninjas perked up and looked at Fugaku. They all caught the implications in Danzo's words. Not only did he question whether the Uchiha had secretly hidden the Two-Tails, but he also directed the blame for the Nine-Tails Knight toward Shisui. Moreover, if Shisui could defeat the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, he might have the potential to control the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. With so many eyes on him, Fugaku's expression grew increasingly grim. He genuinely wished the Uchiha had the strength to provoke the Nine-Tails incident, then, they wouldn't have had to shrink back within their clan's territory. However, the Mangekyo Sharingan indeed had the ability to control tailed beasts, making Shisui's suspicion quite high. This was something he hadn't anticipated. He thought the emergence of the Mangekyo would increase the clan's influence, but instead, it had drawn Danzo's scrutiny and suspicion. If no one stood up to speak for the Uchiha at this moment, they would surely become the target of everyone's criticism. At this point, the third Hokage, who had been sitting in the main seat in silence, slowly spoke up. "Danzo, you need to stop. Shisui grew up under my watch, and I believe he is a good kid. He would never do anything to harm the village. If he really had any ulterior motives, he wouldn't use the Mangekyo Sharingan to protect his comrades." Chapter 212, The Discrepancy Between Master and Apprentice. If Shisui really had any ulterior motives, he wouldn't be using the Mangekyo Sharingan. Upon hearing the third Hokage's statement, Danzo opened his mouth to say something but ultimately gave up and obediently sat back in the corner. The other Konoha Jonin present also stopped whispering and turned their gaze toward the third Hokage. Clearing his throat, the third Hokage continued. In this defensive war against Kumogakure, Jiraiya has performed admirably. With just over 3,000 troops, he repelled an attack from nearly 10,000 of the enemy. Although Yugakure has abandoned their treaty with us, they successfully expelled Kumogakure's influence from the Land of Water, reducing the threat from the northeast. Konoha ninjas no longer have to shed blood for Yugakure. Apart from Jiraiya, the Uchiha, Hyuga, and Inazuka clans have also made significant contributions during the war. Among them, Shisui even defeated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, making outstanding contributions to the village. To reward Shisui, I plan to transfer him to my side for training, appointing him as a team leader. A team leader of the Umbu? This statement immediately caused an uproar in the conference room. Many of the Jonin suspected they had misheard, and both Uchiha Fugaku and Danzo frowned in response. Given Shisui's strength, being appointed as a team leader in the Umbu wasn't out of the question. The security forces and Konoha's defense division had similar positions, typically held by veteran Jonin, and Shisui was more than capable. However, he was to be a leader in the Umbu, and Shisui was an Uchiha. Since the establishment of the Umbu by the second Hokage, only one Uchiha had joined the Umbu, and that was Shisui's grandfather, Uchiha Kagami, but that was decades ago. With this in mind, everyone realized the third Hokage's intentions. Shisui was different from the other Uchiha. His grandfather, Uchiha Kagami, had been part of that group of Uchiha close to the Hokage. The third Hokage's actions aimed to win over the Uchiha and sever ties between Shisui and his clan. This was a blatant political maneuver, yet Uchiha Fugaku had no means to counter it, only nodding reluctantly in agreement. Thank you for your kind intentions, Hokage, but this matter still requires Shisui's consent. The third Hokage smiled lightly and said, I've met with Shisui a few times, he shouldn't have any objections to joining the Umbu. I apologize for taking such a fine subordinate from you, Fugaku. Despite feeling very dissatisfied, Uchiha Fugaku could only respond, it is indeed a blessing for Shisui to be valued by the third Hokage. After stepping in to help the Uchiha and seizing the opportunity to transfer Shisui, the third Hokage continued to distribute rewards. In addition to promising Shisui the position of Umbu team leader, the third Hokage also allocated a number of Jonin slots to the Uchiha, but compared to the number given to the Hyuga clan, the Uchiha's allotment was rather meager. Although the Hyuga ninjas had not contributed significantly during this defensive war, their sheer numbers were substantial. With so many high-level missions combined, this led to a significant increase in the number of Hyuga ninjas promoted to Jonin, even surpassing the Uchiha clan. Danzo observed all of this with disdain, secretly cursing the third Hokage's hypocrisy. From the beginning of the meeting, it had been nothing more than a double act between him and the third Hokage. Whether it was suppressing Jiraiya or recruiting Shisui, or granting excessive Jonin slots to the Hyuga clan. All of this aimed to divide the Uchiha and Hyuga, preventing these two largest clans from uniting. As long as the Hyuga and Uchiha were treated differently, the Uchiha could never ally with the Hyuga, continuing to be suppressed and discriminated against until their clan was completely extinguished. And the Hyuga clan had always been nothing to fear. As long as the caged bird system exists, they need not worry about the Hyuga clan becoming a threat. When necessary, it wouldn't be impossible to unite with the branch family members to deal with the occasionally ambitious main family. However, Danzo was somewhat dissatisfied with this performance. He was always the one playing the villain, while the third Hokage consistently played the role of the nice guy. This was the inherent advantage of the Hokage. Even if he paid a heavy price, he could only hide in the shadows. In the past, he might have felt extremely angry, but ever since obtaining Tenzo, he had calmed down. While Tenzo's bloodline wasn't as powerful as that of Hashirama Senju, it still contained the strength of youth renewal. He just needed to wait until Tenzo grew up, and he could become the next Hokage of the village. When that time came, all the incriminating evidence he had gathered against the third Hokage over the years would be released, forcing the third Hokage to step down, while he would then emerge as the fifth Hokage. The two advisors and Jiraiya were also observing all of this. The advisors were already used to such a scene, having witnessed it for decades. As for the oppressed jonin and clans, they needed to reflect on their own shortcomings. Over the years, had they genuinely worked on developing their own power? Had they contributed anything to the village? Jiraiya sighed inwardly, having already made a decision. After the meeting, Jiraiya headed to the Hokage's office. The third Hokage was watching the live feed through the crystal ball while puffing on his pipe. Upon hearing footsteps, he looked up at Jiraiya and smiled. "Jiraiya, you finally made it. Why do you look a bit unhappy?" "Don't take what I said to heart, it was just some small tactics for dealing with the clans. Danzo doesn't mean to target you specifically. The Uchiha and Hyuga have gained too much recognition this time, and they can easily get carried away. They still need to be reminded of their place. The Jonin slots are also something they require." Seemingly satisfied with Jiraiya's performance, the third Hokage began imparting some Hokage wisdom, preparing to position Jiraiya as the fifth Hokage. Among his disciples, the ones with the most favorable bloodlines and whom he held in the highest regard had either defected or left the village. Now, Jiraiya was the only remaining candidate for Hokage. As for his diligent eldest son and his wayward youngest son, he had considered cultivating them as candidates for Hokage, but they lacked the necessary achievements and strength. If he were to force them into the position of Hokage, the Sarutobi clan would face dire consequences. Jiraiya took a deep breath and then slowly said, "Old man, I heard that Orochimaru has defected." The third Hokage nodded with a complex expression. "Yes, Orochimaru has defected. When he left, he told me that the skies of Konoha can no longer accommodate his ideals, so he chose to leave." "I see." Jiraiya sighed softly, then with a serious expression requested, "Old man, now that the war has ended, I want to leave the village to bring Orochimaru back." Chapter 213, Jiraiya's Departure. Upon hearing that Jiraiya wanted to leave to bring back Orochimaru, the third Hokage pondered for a few seconds before slowly responding. "Jiraiya, you should know that Orochimaru won't come back easily. Moreover, he has harmed comrades in the village and is now a dangerous rogue ninja. Even if you manage to bring Orochimaru back, he will receive the punishment he deserves." "I understand," Jiraiya said with a determined look. "But I still insist on bringing Orochimaru back. I won't allow him to continue down the wrong path." The third Hokage shook his head and replied, "I can't agree to this. The village is currently in a state of disarray and needs you, a war hero, to stabilize things. If word gets out that you're pursuing Orochimaru, the village could easily fall into chaos. And besides, I'm getting old. The position of fifth Hokage can only be handed over to you." Upon hearing this, Jiraiya hesitated, unsure of how to express his inner thoughts to his teacher. While he wanted to bring back Orochimaru, more importantly, he didn't want to stay in the village any longer. He had begun to despise Danzo's insidiousness, the hypocrisy of the advisor duo, and the tedious political maneuvers of the third Hokage. Because of these experiences, Tsunade had left the village, and Orochimaru had recently defected. In fact, thoughts of leaving the village and wandering the world had begun to emerge in his mind. However, if he truly left Konoha, his teacher would be left without a student. After leaving Konoha, he wouldn't find another place to belong. Even the trusted sanctuary of Maiboku Mountain wasn't a permanent solution. He had only one homeland, and that was Konoha. Seemingly aware of Jiraiya's thoughts, the third Hokage sighed softly and then took out a scroll from his drawer, handing it to Jiraiya. Jiraiya took the scroll, noticing it was blank, and looked at the third Hokage in confusion. The third Hokage slowly said, "This is a long-term S-rank infiltration mission. Your task is to wander through various countries and seek out illegal elements that are secretly targeting the village. Remember to stay in touch, submit a mission report periodically." Jiraiya wasn't foolish and quickly understood the third Hokage's intention. The old man didn't agree to his pursuit of Orochimaru, but he also didn't oppose it. This blank mission assignment seemed more like a grant of authority to act as he pleased. "Old man, then I'll take my leave." Having obtained what he wanted, Jiraiya intended to leave immediately. Before stepping out of the office, he turned to the third Hokage and said, "Third Hokage, the policy of suppressing the ninja clans and supporting civilian ninjas isn't wrong, but I believe the reason comrades in the village are willing to give their lives in war relies on the will of fire." "Jiraiya, I know the meaning of the will of fire better than you do." Once Jiraiya left, the third Hokage murmured to himself, then relit his pipe and began to smoke quietly. With Jiraiya's departure, he would become a complete loner. Although the head of the Anbu, Shino, was his son, all the true inheritors of the legendary Sannin had already left the village. Why had this all come to pass? The third Hokage gazed at the portrait of Hashirama Senju, talking to himself in his heart. Jiraiya also quietly left Konoha, without alerting any ninjas during his departure. However, as time went on, Konoha ninjas discovered that Jiraiya had already left, and this news spread quickly throughout the village. Almost every ninja in Konoha became aware of it. There was much speculation within the village about why Jiraiya had suddenly left Konoha. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be unusual for a powerhouse like Jiraiya to go out on a mission, but just after concluding the war with the Cloud Village, and having been sidelined at the celebration, his behavior raised suspicions among the Konoha ninjas. They wondered if Jiraiya had fallen out with the third Hokage, otherwise, wouldn't it have been better to take advantage of the war's end to start campaigning for the position of fifth Hokage? Faced with the village's rumors and speculation, the third Hokage chose not to explain himself. As time passed, these rumors would naturally dissipate. He no longer cared much about his reputation, so let them say what they wanted. Danzo Shimura, who loved to spread rumors, also chose not to attack the third Hokage at this time. Now, he was more clear-headed than ever. Instead of risking failure by attacking the third Hokage, it was better to wait quietly for the third Hokage to make a mistake. Today, he taught Tenzo several would-release techniques, all of which Tenzo mastered. There was also significant progress in the Root Laboratory, where they reportedly discovered a subject with a unique physique that could withstand the corruption of Hashirama's cells and even reduce the side effects of transplanting the Sharingan. Once this technology was fully developed, he could possess both would-release and the Sharingan. When the powers of the Senju of the Forest and the Uchiha clan combined, no one in the ninja world would be his match, not even the third Hokage or Kakashi. Within the Uchiha clan's territory, Itachi had heard about Jiraiya's departure. He didn't know why Jiraiya had left, but he was about to embark on a new chapter in his life. Upon learning that he had awakened the Sharingan, the third Hokage not only didn't doubt him but also transferred him to the Anbu, cultivating him as a trusted subordinate. In the past, he would have been deeply grateful to the third Hokage. He would have thanked the third Hokage for allowing him to be a bridge between the Uchiha and the village, but the successive departures of the Sannin left him with more doubts. If the third Hokage were truly flawless, why had the Sannin left one after another? Was it possible that the third Hokage intended to use him to create a rift between himself and his clan, ultimately seeking to divide the Uchiha? Could he instead leverage the third Hokage to bring about a transformation in his clan? In the Hyuga clan's territory, a meeting of the main family was taking place. Aside from Hayashi Hyuga, all the attendees were members of the main family. Hayashi had only managed to secure his place here due to his accomplishments as the leader of the branch family and on the battlefield against the Cloud Village. The main family elder, sitting in the first seat, first glanced at Hayashi and then said, "Hayashi, you did very well on the front lines this time, earning a lot of opportunities for the family. However, your rise has overshadowed your brother too much, try not to do that next time." Hayashi nodded in agreement. Although he was strong, he wasn't brave enough to challenge the caged bird system. After a pause, the main family elder continued, "As for the head of the family, Hinata will be turning 4 in 2 months. This year, her birthday should be celebrated grandly to mark the rise of the Hyuga clan." The usually silent Hayashi spoke up, "Hinata's birthday party is already in preparation. Please don't worry about that, elder. However, the battlefield has just concluded, is it really appropriate to be so extravagant? It's all for the Hyuga clan. Let's proceed with it," the main family elder said authoritatively. Additionally, it's time for the family to prepare for the caged bird ceremony. Upon hearing this, Hayashi felt as if he had been struck by lightning but dared not voice any objections. He could accept having the caged bird mark branded upon himself, but he could not accept Niji also receiving the mark. Yet this was the fate of the branch family. Over the centuries, many had rebelled, but they all turned to dust in history. The caged bird system had always existed, and the children of the branch family would forever remain as branch family members. Chapter 214, Byakuya Reviewing Intelligence. It had been several days since returning to Amigakure. After arranging for Kakuzu and Haiden to be in the same team, Byakuya leaned back on the sofa in his office to take a brief rest while recalling the process of visiting the cult of the evil god with Haiden over the past few days. The cult of the evil god was a cult organization active within the land of hot water, known for its penchant for killing and sacrifices. Initially, when he found the headquarters of the cult of the evil god, Byakuya was very interested, hoping to discover a powerful hidden organization in the ninja world. However, upon truly arriving at the cult's headquarters, Byakuya realized just how weak the organization was. Apart from the monster that was Haiden, the so-called leader of the cult was at most an elite jonin, not even certain to defeat Kakashi from Konoha next door. When they met Haiden, the leader of the cult's expression changed drastically, his eyes filled with fear. Under the intimidation and temptation of Kakuzu and others, the cult leader joined Haiden to perform the rituals of the cult of the evil god, successfully contacting the evil god of the cult. What Byakuya hadn't expected was that the evil god of the cult truly existed. However, the strength of this so-called evil god was not formidable, its chakra amount was even less than that of the Two Tails. Had the evil god not existed in an alternate space, they might have actually wanted to spar with it and engage in a hunt. Seeing the evil god actively avoiding battle seemed to stimulate Haiden. After eliminating the other members of the cult's headquarters, Haiden chose to join the Akatsuki organization, gaining his self-healing ability. Bringing back his wandering thoughts, Byakuya opened his eyes again and began to handle the intelligence work for the Akatsuki. The trip to the cult of the evil god had consumed almost half a month of his time, and it was time to deal with the mountain of accumulated intelligence. The first piece of intelligence indicated that Kumogakure had hurriedly withdrawn from the land of hot water. It seemed that due to the emergence of troublesome rogue ninjas within the land of lightning, they seized the opportunity while the fourth Raikage and Killer Bee were away to steal important secret techniques from Kumogakure. Upon seeing this intelligence, Byakuya narrowed his eyes. The secret techniques of Kumogakure were generally related to physical skills, but it was unclear whether the rogue ninja behind this was Orochimaru or another ninja. At that moment, Byakuya seemed to recall something and looked towards the direction of the Land of Fire. He only remembered one person who had seized the secret techniques of Kumogakure, that being the remnant of the Land of the Sky, Shino, who wandered between various countries. This individual had previously attacked Konoha during the Second Shinobi World War, ultimately being eradicated by the Hokage and the Sannin. Shino's reappearance coincided with Sasuke's defection period. At that time, Shino was extremely powerful. Not only had he created the Zero Tails based on Konoha's secret techniques, but he also utilized the body revival technique to train the Eight Gates to an extremely profound level. Given Kumogakure's grand actions, it wouldn't be to deal with Shino, would it? Considering Shino's hatred for Konoha and his expertise in medical ninjutsu, Byakuya quietly noted down this piece of information. He intended to send his subordinates out to recover Shino. The second piece of intelligence was related to Iwagakure, Hidden Stone Village. After successfully infiltrating Iwagakure, Kabuto had been gathering intelligence about the inner workings of the village for Danzo, sending a copy to Danzo while also keeping one for himself. During the war between the Cloud Hidden and Konoha, Iwagakure had considered intervening in the war, but ultimately abandoned the plan to ambush Konoha. Firstly, the previous invasion plans against the Land of Grass and Konoha had been thwarted by Minato, making the chances of success for another ambush even slimmer. Secondly, there were tensions between the third Tsuchikage Inoki and the Jinchuriki. The Jinchuriki of Iwagakure were all very powerful, possessing strength on par with the five Kage, but they were all lone wolves who greatly disliked Inoki's style of governance. Inoki had never considered handing over the position of Tsuchikage to either of the Jinchuriki. In this situation, the strength of a Wabakure could not coalesce, let alone take the initiative to attack Konoha. However, upon hearing about the actions of the Akatsuki organization, Inoki took the initiative to send someone to Amagakure to establish friendly relations. Inoki wanted to use the Akatsuki to create chaos in the surrounding smaller countries, seizing the opportunity to gradually bring these countries into his sphere of influence and slowly erode the alliance system of Konoha. Regarding the message sent by Inoki, Byakuya did not rashly intervene. He planned to pass it on to Yahiko. Yahiko had matured into the leader of Amagakure, and so, many matters should be left to him to handle. There was no concept of good or evil between ninja villages, everything was done for mutual benefit. Even their teacher, Jiraiya, understood this, and Yahiko should be well aware of it too. After all, if one really believed in allies, the fate of the Uzumaki village was the best example. Rather than relying on allies for protection, it was better to make preparations in advance. After reviewing the intelligence related to Iwagakure, Byakuya looked at the remaining intelligence from other ninja villages. Sunagakure, located in the Land of Wind, remained as calm as ever. In this era, where oil resources had yet to be fully developed, there wouldn't be much interest from other ninja villages in the Land of Wind. However, recently, with the passing of the previous Jinchuriki, Sunagakure had elected a new Jinchuriki. This time, the Jinchuriki was none other than the youngest son of the fourth Kazekage, Raza, Gaara. There wasn't much intelligence coming from Kirigakure either, but the current Mizukage should be Obito, whose education level could be likened to that of an elementary school graduate. Whether he governed Kirigakure seriously or engaged in foolishness, the damage to the village would be about the same. In addition, there were some scattered pieces of intelligence regarding various legends in the ninja world, like tales of a gambling fat sheep. After reviewing these, Byakuya turned to the main event, the intelligence from Konoha. A thick stack was entirely dedicated to Konoha, reflecting the degree of his concern for the village. This was unavoidable. Setting aside the information about the departure of the Sannin and the internal conflicts among the ninja clans, Konoha was the strongest ninja village in the ninja world, capable of dominating the entire world with the strength of just one village during its peak. Even at its weakest, it could still hold its own against two opponents. The Uchiha, Senju, and Hyuga clans also resided within Konoha, not to mention the recently born but yet to mature Ashura and Indra reincarnations. Soon, Byakuya found the latest intelligence about Konoha. Konoha had neglected Jiraiya during the victory celebration and suppressed both the Hyuga and Uchiha clans. Shortly after the celebration ended, the last of the Sannin, Jiraiya, quietly left the Leaf Village. Seeing this news, Byakuya was somewhat surprised but also expected it. With Orochimaru already having defected, Jiraiya, as his close friend, would definitely go out to look for Orochimaru. This was the essence of Konoha, what they called bonds. The dilemma was that he had recently made contact with Orochimaru. If Jiraiya were to see them meet on that day, it would not bode well. The relationship between Konoha and Amagakure was still in a honeymoon phase, and they could not afford to enter into a hostile state just yet. Chapter 215, Next Steps. Byakuya had always considered recruiting a scientific genius like Orochimaru. Orochimaru's talent in biology could be considered the best in the ninja world. Whether it was simplifying the Sage Mode with the Heavenly Curse Seal technique or the technology for implanting and merging bloodline limits, he could mass-produce subordinates with the strength of elite Jonin. In addition, Orochimaru had also improved the reanimation jutsu. He transformed what was originally a technique used solely as an auxiliary for explosive tags into an immortal reanimated monster, which could only be sealed away. If he could recruit Orochimaru, there would be no need for him to share anything. The continuous manufacturing of resources would allow him to pile up his strength to surpass that of the 5 Kage. Pulling his wandering thoughts back, Byakuya suddenly looked down at the ground and saw Black Zetsu emerging from the earth, casually sitting down in front of him. Noticing Black Zetsu, Byakuya frowned and said, "Black Zetsu-senpai, the office is full of people. If Yahiko and the others find out, it won't be easy for me to explain. Don't worry, they're currently in a meeting at the Amagakure Tower, so they won't notice us here." Byakuya finally relaxed, then curiously asked, "What's the reason for your visit, Black Zetsu-senpai? Has Masked Man made any new moves?" Black Zetsu shook his head and sighed. The Masked Man has now taken control of Kirigakure. I don't know if he's trying to compete with you, but he's busy managing the village every day. Initially, Black Zetsu had quite a favorable impression of Obito, the inheritor of Madara. However, even though Obito wasn't very sharp and often took things to extremes, he was the easiest Uchiha to control and the best executor of the Moon Eye Plan. But comparison was troublesome. Obito's actions during the Nine Tails attack and in collecting tailed beasts didn't measure up to Byakuya's efforts. Although Obito had indirectly controlled the entire Kirigakure through Yagura, the village had become fragmented and chaotic under his management, hardly able to contribute any strength. The Three Tails and Six Tails were both tailed beasts of the Kirigakure. However, the Three Tails was still waiting for revival in a corner of the ninja world, and the Six Tails Jinchuriki was quite self-reliant, playing at disappearing and rarely stayed in the Kirigakure. Meanwhile, Byakuya not only developed Amigakure very well but also secretly captured the Two Tails Jinchuriki. The news about the Two Tails capture didn't cause much of a stir in the ninja world, which alleviated some obstacles for the Akatsuki's subsequent plans. After a pause, Black Zetsu continued, "Byakuya, I came to reward you this time. You successfully captured the Two Tails Jinchuriki. I don't have much to offer, but I can give you a few small gifts." Black Zetsu was going to give gifts? Byakuya was slightly taken aback but quickly smiled and said, "Black Zetsu-senpai, how can I accept this?" Black Zetsu clapped his hands, and several white Zetsu emerged from the ground. Byakuya pretended to be curious and asked, "Aren't these white Zetsu? Do they have any special abilities?" "I already have one in Akatsuki with me." Black Zetsu noticed Byakuya's curiosity and said, "Do you remember the wood release used by the Masked Man?" The Masked Man himself doesn't have the ability to use wood release, but after transplanting white Zetsu cells, he gained the ability to use it. With your physique, you should be able to handle part of the wood release's power. I'll leave these white Zetsu to you. Wood release, Byakuya's eyes brightened, then he smiled and said, "Since you're being so kind, I won't refuse." Although he was unsure of Black Zetsu's true intentions in giving him white Zetsu, and whether there might be any controlling methods like seals involved, at least he could now use wood release openly and utilize the white Zetsu as sacrifices for the reanimation jutsu. After Byakuya accepted the white Zetsu, Black Zetsu finally stated his purpose. "Byakuya, now that you've captured the Two Tails, what's your plan next? Should we target the other tailed beasts now and collect them all as soon as possible?" Byakuya glanced at Black Zetsu, then gently shook his head and said, "Black Zetsu-senpai, capturing one or two tailed beasts isn't a difficult task for us, but our goal is the entire ninja world. The Akatsuki spent 2 to 3 years taking control of Amigakure, and it will take a few more years to unify the land of hot water. If we rashly provoke a war, the Akatsuki might be pushed back to square one." Black Zetsu fell silent for a few seconds. His only plan was to revive his mother. He had never thought of ruling the world. However, if he were to oppose Byakuya at this moment, Byakuya would definitely begin to question the Moon Eye Plan. After all, unlike Obito, Byakuya did not believe that the infinite Tsukuyomi would bring peace. "What's your plan, then?" Black Zetsu asked. Byakuya pondered for a moment and slowly replied, "I don't plan to take action against the 5 great countries in the coming years. I will focus on the surrounding small nations. However, we should still find a way to stir up internal conflicts among the 5 great ninja villages and trap them in endless infighting. For that plan to sprout, I've almost prepared the means to deal with the Wagakure and Sunagakure. But Konoha is indeed a bit tricky. Although I secretly placed Shursui as a spy, he is still loyal to his clan and Konoha. Getting him to bring his clan members into the Akatsuki will be quite challenging. If possible, you and the Masked Man should carry out activities in Konoha. It's inconvenient for me to act there for the time being." After hearing this, Black Zetsu lightly nodded. "Leave Konoha to me and the Masked Man. You can rest assured about that. However, do you really plan to let the Uchiha join the Akatsuki?" Byakuya shook his head, appearing strategic as he said, "Not just the Uchiha. I want to recruit more ninja clans from Konoha. The more friends, the better. From now on, I'll need you to help out more, Black Zetsu-senpai." At that moment, Black Zetsu seemed to remember something and quickly asked, "Byakuya, do you remember the fourth Hokage's child who was the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tails? He seems to have become the new Nine-Tails Jinchuriki." Byakuya nodded. "Black Zetsu-senpai, are you planning to target Naruto? He's too young. If we're not careful, he could die with the Nine-Tails, which would waste a lot of our time." Black Zetsu clarified, "I'm not planning to target Naruto, but I'm wondering if we can influence him while he's still young. That way, we'll have the strongest Nine-Tails Jinchuriki on our side in the future. And since you're always resourceful, do you have any good ideas?" Black Zetsu was withholding some thoughts. He indeed wanted to control Naruto, but in addition to controlling the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, he also wanted to manipulate the young Ashura. Every time he tried to support Indra, he had failed, and it was time to cultivate Ashura this time. Byakuya glanced at Black Zetsu and saw through his thoughts. However, Black Zetsu's plan to cultivate Ashura was also quite interesting and might yield unexpected results. Chapter 216, Hiruzen Sarutobi and Naruto. Byakuya and Black Zetsu talked for a long time, from the current state of the Jinchuriki to how to properly cultivate them. After listening to Byakuya's training plan, Black Zetsu had big question marks all over his small head, but due to his recognition of Byakuya's abilities, Black Zetsu chose to believe him. After all, in the past 1,000 years, he had never had a subordinate as reliable as Byakuya. Not wanting to waste any more time, after bidding farewell to Byakuya, Black Zetsu burrowed underground and quickly headed toward Konohadakur, Hidden Leaf Village. Just a day later, Black Zetsu arrived at Konohadakur. He first searched around the Sarutobi clan's residence and the Umbu base for Naruto, but found no trace of him. Just as Black Zetsu suspected whether the third Hokage had sent Naruto elsewhere for training, he unexpectedly bumped into the poor little Naruto on the street. Little Naruto appeared to be only about 3 or 4 years old, struggling to carry a plastic bag as he made his way toward the wilderness. The bag contained not much, just a few buckets of instant ramen and some cartons of milk, which seemed enough to fill his stomach. But was it really okay for Konoha ninja to be so indifferent? They actually allowed a Jinchuriki to wander around the streets freely. Moreover, if he heard correctly, the few villagers watching from a distance were discussing Naruto, saying that he seemed to be the child of a demon fox, who once brought misfortune and calamity to the village. Although Black Zetsu didn't understand the ninja's way of thinking, he felt that this situation was somewhat off. According to Byakuya, shouldn't a Jinchuriki be carefully nurtured to foster their sense of belonging to the village? Why would they let such a small child live alone? If he were truly an orphan with nothing, it would be understandable, but this was the son of the fourth Hokage. Soon, Black Zetsu noticed the Umbu members hiding in the corners monitoring Naruto and silently rejoiced that he hadn't revealed himself recklessly. Otherwise, if the Umbu found him, it would be even more challenging to approach Naruto in the future. Continuing to lurk underground, Black Zetsu witnessed Naruto's entire day. Compared to the children in orphanages, Naruto's life was undoubtedly happy. Not only did he have his own small house, but even his fridge was always stuffed full, with some food even going bad from being piled up too high. However, due to the lack of guardians, Naruto lived a largely unrestricted life, but this also brought endless loneliness. Naruto had no friends and didn't know what he wanted to do in the future. With nothing to do, Naruto could only wander around the village, enjoying the solitude and loneliness that belonged to him alone. Unbeknownst to him, he had left the Konohadakur urban area and, with a fishing rod and bucket in hand, arrived at the river outside the village, beginning to fish by himself. He didn't lack food, but he enjoyed the process of fishing. After all, no one paid attention to him on the street, so it was better to fish in the wilderness. At least there were no cold stares from villagers, nor those annoying peers. He never understood what he did wrong that always drew their ire. He could take on 1 or 2 of them, but couldn't fight against the united front of his peers and ultimately had to leave in shame. It was a significant matter for the Jinchuriki to leave the urban area, and the Umbu secretly protecting Naruto exchanged glances. One went to report to the Hokage's building, while the other stayed behind to monitor Naruto. Unaware of all this, Naruto continued to fish, casting his line again and again. Before long, his small bucket was full, so he stopped fishing, took out his lighter, and searched for wood to light a fire. After scraping the fish scales and gutting them, Naruto made a few cuts in the fish meat before he began to grill the fish. Under the flames, the fish quickly started to sizzle and release oil. Naruto, seeing this, didn't rush as he liked the charred flavor, as it brought him a sense of satisfaction when he ate it. At that moment, an elderly figure walked from the dusk, slowly approaching Naruto. This person was none other than Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, who had recently received reports from the Umbu. After the war ended, he suddenly had a lot of free time and finally had the opportunity to visit Naruto. Naruto is the child of Minato and Kushina. He is also the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails in the village. Every time he sees Naruto's smiling face, he always recalls Minato and Kushina, as well as the prosperous days in Konohagakure. Hearing footsteps, Naruto instinctively shrank back, but when he saw it was the third Hokage, he hesitantly said, "Grandpa Hokage, what brings you here?" "I came to visit little Naruto, to see how you are doing." "If you need anything, you can tell Grandpa Hokage," he replied. "Grandpa Hokage, I'm doing well. I never lack food or clothes, but the adults in the village always target me, and my peers don't want to be friends with me." After a pause, Naruto hesitated before asking, "Grandpa Hokage, do you think it's because I don't have parents that they bully me and don't want to play with me?" What Naruto said shook the third Hokage's heart. He sighed gently and replied, "That may be part of the reason, but I can issue an order to them to stop discussing you." When it came to his origins, Naruto asked with confusion, "Grandpa Hokage, who exactly are my parents, and what did they do before?" The third Hokage looked at Naruto and said, "Your parents were ninjas in the village and offended many enemies. To protect you, I cannot reveal their identities, not even to you." "Oh, I see." Naruto was silent for a moment before saying, then, "Grandpa Hokage, you don't need to issue an order. Let them say what they want, it doesn't matter to me. I don't want to trouble you anymore." After speaking, Naruto took out a skewer of grilled fish and handed it to the third Hokage. "I may not have other friends, but as long as I have Grandpa Hokage, that's enough. And, this precious little thing frowning face." The third Hokage took the grilled fish, took a bite, and frowned. Due to the lack of seasoning, the grilled fish didn't taste good, but the third Hokage's heart was filled with mixed emotions. His visit was not only to check on Naruto's living conditions but also to test Naruto's character and see if he inherited Minato's excellent lineage. It seemed that Naruto had passed the test and was fully capable of becoming a qualified Jinchuriki, but the third Hokage felt a bit sad about his own shortcomings. He felt somewhat guilty toward Naruto. Throughout the ninja world, all Jinchuriki face discrimination from the villagers. On one hand, this is due to the tailed beasts having previously harmed ninjas. On the other hand, it's also a fear of the Jinchuriki's power. Before they become perfect Jinchuriki, they can easily turn into rampaging beasts. Most importantly, the discrimination Jinchuriki face actually facilitates their control. In an environment where everyone discriminates against the Jinchuriki, if just one person stands up for them, the Jinchuriki will feel grateful and become a valuable asset to protect the village. As a qualified Hokage, there are things he cannot do but must do. Chapter 217, The Old Man Black Zetsu Independent. After sending Naruto home, the third Hokage hurriedly returned to the Hokage Tower. As Hokage, he didn't have much time to waste on Naruto. There were many orphans in the village that needed care, and Naruto was just one of the more special cases. He also needed to focus on maintaining the balance of power. After granting several Jonin slots to the Hyuga clan, he initially intended to appease them while subtly inciting conflict between the Hyuga and Uchiha clans, letting them argue over who was the strongest bloodline clan. However, He didn't expect the Hyuga clan to become so inflated with ambition that they set their sights on various departments, thinking they could forcefully become advisory elders due to their number of jonin, and even colluded with Danzo in secret. If Danzo and the Hyuga clan really reached an agreement, his position as Hokage would be in grave danger. Although he had once been the Hokage of the village, his current identity was merely acting Hokage. If the jonin united to impeach him, he risked being forced to abdicate. He wasn't attached to the power of Hokage, but he absolutely couldn't let Danzo take the position. After the third Hokage left, Black Zetsu first sensed the positions of the Umbu around, then transformed into a spore and landed on Naruto's shoulder. He planned to use the spore technique to secretly influence Naruto. Previously, Black Zetsu had doubted Naruto's identity as Ashura, but after today's observations, he was completely certain that Naruto was indeed the reincarnation of Ashura. Only Ashura's reincarnation could have such an optimistic mindset, as it was difficult for others to achieve this. Naruto lay on the 1.5-meter-high windowsill, tilting his head to look at the scenery outside. The moonlit sky illuminated the 4 Hokage statues quietly resting on the cliff. The time spent with Grandpa Hokage was enjoyable, but in an instant, he was alone again. Living alone was very free but also incredibly lonely. If only there was someone to talk to, he truly felt the need for a friend. At that moment, a voice suddenly called out to Naruto, "Hey, you little brat over there, what are you doing?" Naruto jumped in surprise, looking around fearfully and asking, "Who are you? Where are you? Are you a ghost or a devil? What do you want?" "I'm right here, on your desk." "On my desk?" Naruto went over to the desk and saw nothing but a kunai pendant. He picked up the pendant and cautiously asked, "Are you in this kunai pendant?" Black Zetsu nodded and said, "Be gentle with me since I don't want to be scratched or chipped. But you, little brat, do have some fate with me since you've awakened me." "Awakened you? Are you very old?" Naruto probed. "Of course. I've been living in this pendant for hundreds of years, since you can respectfully call me Black Old," Black Zetsu replied. "Black Old?" After a pause, Naruto pulled up a chair and sat down at the desk, saying, "Why are you in this kunai pendant? Did you encounter some enemies? My story could take 3 days and nights to tell." Black Zetsu's cold snort echoed in Naruto's ears, which piqued Naruto's interest and made him want to dig deeper. "I have time, so you can continue, Grandpa." Faced with Naruto's endless curiosity, Black Zetsu felt a sweat break out, but he could only grit his teeth and fabricate a legendary story for Naruto. While fabricating the story, even Black Zetsu felt that it had some significant holes. But he had no choice, since this was the method that Byakuya provided him, to approach Naruto with the guise of a kind, gentle old man and gradually influence him step by step. Moreover, Byakuya's approach was entirely different from the way he had manipulated Indra, since it was a whole different strategy. An hour later, Naruto was so exhausted that he could barely keep his eyes open. After wishing Black Zetsu good night, he collapsed onto his bed and fell into a deep sleep. Seeing this, Black Zetsu let out a sigh of relief. Although he had manipulated more than a dozen Indras, he had only done so after they had grown up, since this was the first time he was nurturing one from childhood. He had never encountered a curious child like Naruto. Nearby, an Umbu watching from a tree frowned. Before falling asleep, Naruto had been talking to himself for several minutes. While it was common for children to go through a phase of talking to themselves, the duration seemed a bit excessive. This strange phenomenon had to be reported to the Hokage, since any little matter concerning a Jinchuriki in the village was significant and could not be overlooked. The next morning, Naruto saw the third Hokage again. The third Hokage arrived carrying snacks and milk. After checking around Naruto's home, he noticed the uniquely designed kunai pendant. Such small trinkets were common in Konoha, but the third Hokage still took the time to examine it thoroughly. After confirming that the kunai pendant was fine, he pretended to leave Naruto's house. Upon hearing Naruto talking to the pendant, he turned back. After confirming once more that the kunai pendant was alright, the third Hokage sighed softly in relief and finally left. Naruto's self-talk wasn't due to any ninja acting in secret since it was genuinely a result of his loneliness. It seemed he needed to arrange a few friends for Naruto, and the two boys from the Inuzuka clan would be good candidates. After the third Hokage left, Naruto said to Black Zetsu, "Old Man Black, how come Hokage Grandpa didn't discover you? Weren't you hiding in this kunai pendant?" Black Zetsu scoffed and replied, "Heh. How could a mere Kage-level shinobi detect me? But your Hokage Grandpa does seem to care about you. He came to check on you yesterday and again today." Naruto didn't catch the implication in Black Zetsu's words and nodded, saying, "Hokage Grandpa has always been good to me since he just doesn't have much time because he's busy with work. But he checked on you yesterday and again today since that's indeed a bit strange. Is Hokage Grandpa not usually very busy?" Seeing Naruto lost in thought, Black Zetsu chuckled and said, "Maybe he really is too busy with his duties. But your Hokage Grandpa is so good to you since you should repay him well in the future." "Of course. I will definitely repay Hokage Grandpa." After a pause, Naruto said to Black Zetsu, "But let's not talk about Hokage Grandpa. You still haven't finished the story you started yesterday since those ninja stories are so interesting and fun. Those aren't just stories since they are things I have witnessed myself. Things from hundreds of years ago are all pretty much the same since anyway, I'm just listening casually since it doesn't really relate to me." Chapter 218, Naruto, you should reflect on your own issues. After spending a few days together, Naruto and Black Zetsu became close friends, sharing everything with each other. This outcome was anticipated by Black Zetsu. With an orphan like Naruto, who lived alone, it only took a little show of kindness for him to trust someone wholeheartedly. All of this was thanks to the upper echelons of Konoha. Without them, it would have been quite challenging to approach the reincarnation of Ashura. Every reincarnation of Ashura naturally possesses an optimistic mindset and a powerful affinity for others. No matter how gifted Indra's reincarnations might be, they ultimately fall to the power of companionship. This was the reason why the original Indra lost to Ashura, and it was also the favoritism shown by Kagaya Akatsuki. That ungrateful child, who betrayed his mother, chose to live among humans. He repeatedly interfered in the competition between Ashura and Indra, causing his plans to fail time and again, a truly heinous crime, unforgivable in nature. However, things were about to take a turn. This time, he was not relying on Indra's reincarnation. Instead, he had found more like-minded subordinates to carry out the Eye of the Moon plan, even recruiting the reincarnation of Ashura into it. With this thought in mind, Black Zetsu looked at the peacefully sleeping Naruto, a subtle smile forming on his lips. After a dreamless night, Naruto opened his sleepy eyes, softly greeted the kunai pendant with a few good mornings, and quietly began to prepare breakfast. Breakfast was merely a bowl of instant noodles. Living alone and never having learned to cook, Naruto relied on instant noodles for all his meals, occasionally going out to fish to improve his diet. Today, he had woken up early. Usually, he didn't even eat breakfast. Seeing this scene, Black Zetsu furrowed his brows. It was no wonder Naruto was shorter than his peers. He wasn't eating properly. If this continued, would he end up malnourished and weakened in combat? That wouldn't do since it could jeopardize the Eye of the Moon plan and, in turn, affect his mother's rescue. With that in mind, Black Zetsu said to Naruto, "Naruto, is this all you eat every day? This lack of nutrition won't do as you'll end up even smaller than the others." Naruto chuckled, "I don't know how to cook anything else, and instant noodles are really tasty and easy to make. If you weren't stuck in that pendant, you'd probably like them too." Black Zetsu was momentarily taken aback. He wanted to refute Naruto but couldn't find the right words. As the last descendant of Kagaya Akatsuki, he was fundamentally different from his two brothers, who inherited most of their mother's power, a force capable of destroying the world. He, on the other hand, was merely a product created by his mother's bloodline net, a more unique creation. Due to his special body structure, he only needed to rely on photosynthesis to meet his life requirements. His understanding of food was limited to what he had learned from past Ashuras and Byakuya. He had no idea what instant noodles actually tasted like, but other kids didn't seem to treat their meals as casually as Naruto did. Remaining silent, Black Zetsu watched as Naruto finished his noodles and went to the bathroom. Taking advantage of the Umbu outside being distracted, he quickly took a sip of the noodle soup, and his eyes lit up. This instant noodle was indeed delicious, no wonder little Naruto ate them every day. For the past 1,000 years, Black Zetsu had been tirelessly working to lift his mother's seal, completely forgetting to take a look at the bustling shinobi world. He wondered if his mother, sealed on the moon, would appreciate it. After Naruto returned from the bathroom, Black Zetsu reattached himself to Naruto's body, whispering a few words into his ear. Naruto picked up the kunai pendant from the table, put it around his neck, and stepped outside. To be honest, Naruto didn't want to go out since the outside world was full of malice towards him. However, under Black Zetsu's strong insistence, he forced himself to step out of the door. Walking alone down the street, he felt the cold, indifferent gazes of passers-by upon him, which made him extremely anxious. But Black Zetsu, now inhabiting Naruto, was very excited. He looked at the bustling crowd and the dazzling array of goods, mentally noting their appearances. Spotting a wooden comb, Black Zetsu said in Naruto's ear, "Naruto, I'm interested in that comb over there. Go ask how much it costs." Naruto hesitated, looking at the comb. "Old man Black, I have very little pocket money, and the owner might not even sell it to me. Just try it. You won't know unless you ask." Impatient with Naruto's indecisiveness, Black Zetsu urged him on. Hearing this, Naruto steeled himself and approached the vendor to inquire about the price. When the vendor noticed it was Naruto asking, his expression turned even more indifferent. "Hey kid, are you thinking of stealing something?" "I'm not," Naruto shook his head. "I came here to buy something." "Buy something? Are you interested in this comb?" The vendor glanced at Naruto, then coldly continued, "This comb is really cheap, only 1,000 ryo. Can you afford that?" 1,000 ryo? Naruto was taken aback, stunned by the price of the comb. His monthly living expenses were only 50,000 ryo, approximately 50,000 yen, and this comb cost 1,000 ryo. Was the vendor trying to cheat him? Upon hearing the vendor's price, Black Zetsu frowned as well. While he was unsure about the prices in the shinobi world, he could tell from Naruto's expression that he was being taken advantage of. This made Black Zetsu quite unhappy. How dare anyone bully his subordinate? Feeling dejected, Naruto left the street and ended up in a nearby park, where a few children his age were playing ninja games. As soon as they saw Naruto approaching, they stopped their game, staring at him with eyes that seemed to say, "You're a freak, get out of our park." With the kids watching him, Naruto had no choice but to leave again. Wandering around, he finally made his way to the riverbank. This was the only place without other adults or children, completely belonging to him alone. Sitting on a large stone by the shore, Naruto scratched the dirt with a stick, murmuring, "Why is it different from what Grandpa Hokage said? Why do they always bully me?" Seeing Naruto in such a pitiful state, Black Zetsu several times felt like telling him to fight back. The ninjas he had encountered before, whether they were Ashura's reincarnation or Byakuya, had countless ways to bully others and would never allow themselves to be harassed. Even the kindest Obito would get angry when it came to core interests. But Ashura's reincarnation Naruto was different, as this was a complete insult to the Akatsuki bloodline. The Akatsuki were inherently proud individuals. Once he calmed down, Black Zetsu recalled Byakuya's advice and said to Naruto, "It takes two hands to clap, Naruto. You should reflect on your own issues." Chapter 219, Naruto gradually going off track. A hand can't clap without the other. I should reflect on my own issues? Upon hearing this, Naruto's eyes widened in shock. He never expected Black Zetsu to say such a thing. They were friends, weren't they? Shouldn't he be on Naruto's side? Since birth, Naruto hadn't done anything particularly wrong. Why was he treated with disdain by the villagers? He never asked for any special treatment, all he wanted was to be seen as a normal person. Why was that so difficult? In that moment, A surge of strong resentment filled Naruto, and his fists clenched tightly. However, both Grandpa Hokage, who treated him well, and Old Man Black were saying the same thing. Maybe he really did have issues. He shouldn't have left home without permission, and he shouldn't be on the streets affecting others' moods. Releasing his tightly clenched fists, Naruto forced a smile and said to Black Zetsu, "Old Man Black, what should I do to earn the villagers' recognition?" Black Zetsu looked into Naruto's eyes and replied, "It's been hundreds of years since my time, so I don't know exactly what you should do. But you can consult your Hokage since he should know what to do." "Consult Hokage Grandpa?" Naruto took Black Zetsu's words to heart and continued to wander along the riverbank. When the third Hokage arrived again, Naruto curiously asked, "Grandpa Hokage, what do you think I need to do to gain the village's recognition?" Hearing this, the third Hokage smiled, ruffled Naruto's hair, and sent someone to the library to fetch a few books. The thick books had golden letters embossed on the cover, titled The Will of Fire. Handing the book to Naruto, the third Hokage said with a smile, "Gaining the villagers' recognition is quite simple. Just read this book and follow its teachings strictly. The people of the village are good at heart. So, as long as you treat them sincerely, they will respond in kind." Naruto nodded, somewhat understanding. "Hokage Grandpa, I will read this book carefully because I really want everyone's recognition. I want to be their friend." Seeing this, the third Hokage felt a warm happiness in his heart. Naruto was so kind, he would definitely gain the recognition of others and become the protector of the village as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. As for whether the Will of Fire would truly be effective, even the Hokage himself wasn't certain. After the third Hokage left, Naruto eagerly opened the Will of Fire and began to read earnestly. Black Zetsu was also intrigued and leaned over Naruto's shoulder to look at the content. After glancing through it, Black Zetsu rolled his eyes. Wasn't this just the same old doctrine from the ninja sect back in the day? The Sage of Six Paths liked to play this game as well and distributed chakra to everyone in the ninja sect. At that time, the ninja sect was an organization dedicated to helping everyone. Yet, less than a few decades after the sage's death, the ninja world began to fracture along clan lines. If it hadn't been for Hashirama Senju emerging decades ago, the number of nations in the ninja world would have at least multiplied tenfold by now. But this was also part of his and Byakuya's plan. Where the leaves dance, the fire continues to burn. Seeing this phrase from the Will of Fire, Naruto couldn't help but read it aloud. He then turned to Black Zetsu and asked, "Old Man Black, what does this sentence mean? I don't quite understand its significance." Black Zetsu glanced at Naruto and said with a blank expression, "It's quite simple. It means that the older generation will protect the new one. Even when faced with danger, they rush in to sacrifice themselves, leaving hope for the next generation." Naruto smiled innocently, "I get it. It means that if I'm in danger, Grandpa Hokage and you, Old Man Black, would sacrifice yourselves to protect me, right?" Black Zetsu was taken aback by the statement, feeling an odd resemblance to Byakuya's words. "No, why should I sacrifice my life to protect this brat? Please, we're not that close. I just want to use you." After suppressing his thoughts, Black Zetsu replied helplessly, "I don't have that kind of resolve, but your Hokage definitely does. To protect the new generation in the village, he would surely be willing to sacrifice himself. I think Grandpa Hokage would do that too." Naruto nodded but then looked at Black Zetsu with a puzzled expression, "But Old Man Black, do you have something against Grandpa Hokage? I feel like your tone is a bit off." Seeing that his thoughts were exposed by this little brat, Black Zetsu's expression darkened. "You misheard me. I'm just feeling inadequate. After seeing the content of the Will of Fire, it feels like my spirit has undergone a kind of evolution." Naruto was relentless. "I still feel something's off. Are you trying to deceive me?" Black Zetsu waved his hands repeatedly. "A little brat like you shouldn't overthink things. Even if I were to deceive you, would your Hokage deceive you? Just follow what it says and don't disturb my rest." "I got it. I'll read quietly." After spending a week, Naruto finally finished reading The Will of Fire. After absorbing the cases and annotations from the past Hokage, Naruto felt like he had experienced a spiritual awakening. Next came the practice of the Will of Fire. With a bold spirit and unwavering determination, Naruto stepped out of his home, already envisioning himself gaining the villagers' recognition and becoming Hokage. However, not long after leaving home, Naruto faced significant setbacks. After running into obstacles multiple times, he returned home and lay on his bed, looking at the kunai pendant and said, "Old Man Black, they all said they don't need my help and want me to get lost and not disturb their business." Seeing Naruto's dejection, Black Zetsu rubbed his forehead and replied, "Maybe your way of communicating is the problem? Or perhaps you're not sincere enough? The Will of Fire doesn't lie, and your Hokage wouldn't deceive you either. If these methods truly had issues, your Hokage wouldn't have become Hokage in the first place." "Old Man Black, you're right. I shouldn't give up after a small setback." After saying that, Naruto gathered his courage once again, left home, and continued to look for people in need of help. Once Naruto had left, Black Zetsu took advantage of the moment when the Umbu had departed and quickly wrote a letter, instructing White Zetsu to deliver it to the Akatsuki organization. The training plan for Naruto was progressing smoothly, but the key issues still required Byakuya's oversight. Chapter 220, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. Inside the Akatsuki office. After placing a cup of brewed coffee on the table, Byakuya opened the first letter sent by Black Zetsu. The contents were quite simple. After 2 weeks of interaction, Black Zetsu had already gained Naruto's initial trust. Now his standing in Naruto's eyes was now comparable to that of the third Hokage. This was entirely expected by Byakuya. Having been an orphan himself, he understood what orphans truly needed. Although Black Zetsu's methods were somewhat rough, they were within a controllable range, which pleased Byakuya. He silently praised him as one of the hidden hands in the ninja world, as he certainly had some skill. As for why he didn't let Black Zetsu teach Naruto about the darker side of the ninja arts and lead him down a path of destruction. A completely fallen Nine-Tails Jinchuriki could pose a significant threat to Konoha and even the entire ninja world. The reason was simple: Akatsuki was an organization that loved peace. While some members within the organization might secretly plot world-ending plans like the Moon Eye Plan, their motives stemmed from a desire for global harmony. As long as Black Zetsu instilled the ideals of truth, goodness, and beauty in Naruto, he would eventually stand on their side. After all, the ninjas who strictly followed the Will of Fire were, aside from the first Hokage, mostly idealistic lower-ranked ninjas who selflessly devoted themselves. The higher-ups in Konoha did not believe in such notions. Retrieving his drifting thoughts, Byakuya casually wrote down some suggestions for Black Zetsu to pass on and then shifted his focus to other important matters. For example, the ongoing issues with the Yugakure, hidden hot water village. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Yahiko and Konan, Yugakure had also been integrated into the mutual assistance system established by Akatsuki, reaching several cooperative agreements with its allied nation, Amigakure. The collaboration between a resource-rich country and an industrial nation yielded results greater than the sum of their parts. However, despite the pleasant cooperation between Yugakure and Amigakure, a significant problem loomed ahead that needed immediate resolution. That was the issue of distance. Amigakure lay to the northwest of the Land of Fire, while Yugakure was to the northeast. The two were separated by over 1,000 kilometers, with several smaller ninja nations in between. For Amigakure to develop a closer collaboration with Yugakure, they had to consider the influence of these smaller ninja villages. If any of these villages chose to obstruct them, their commercial activities would suffer severely. The smaller nations in question included Kusagakure, Hidden Grass Village, Land of Mountains, and Land of Rice Fields. Kusagakure had long-standing grievances with Amigakure and was a village that needed to be dealt with. It also housed Kirigakure's infamous Uzuki Castle, which imprisoned several high-level fugitives. Considering the international ramifications, Akatsuki couldn't simply strike at Kusagakure directly. They could only look for ways to exploit the conflicts between Kusagakure and Uzuki Castle, hoping to foster a proxy. Takigakure was an obscure village that mainly engaged in missions. It had little activity otherwise. The seven tails residing in Takigakure was something that Akatsuki needed to secure. Only by capturing all the tailed beasts could they resurrect the 10 tails and initiate the infinite Tsukuyomi plan. However, due to the existence of the 7 tails, Akatsuki currently couldn't take action. At this point, the only viable target seemed to be Land of Rice Fields, which only contained a small ninja village called Otogakure, Sound Ninja Village. And it never existed until Orochimaru founded it. So, author here is making this detail up. This village, established by elite ninjas, had a total of only a few dozen people, including its leader. For Byakuya, incorporating Otogakure wasn't a difficult task, but the name reminded him of one of the legendary Sanin of Konoha, Orochimaru. He had intentionally left Otogakure as bait, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Unfortunately, it had already been several months since Orochimaru's defection, and he hadn't made any significant moves in the ninja world. If it weren't for knowing the bond between the third Hokage and Orochimaru, he might even suspect that Orochimaru had died under the third Hokage's rod. At that moment, an Akatsuki member rushed into the office, holding a scroll in hand. Byakuya looked up at the member and asked indifferently, "Is there important intelligence?" "I remember you were specifically tasked with gathering information about Jiraiya." The Akatsuki member nodded and handed the scroll to Byakuya. Byakuya opened the scroll, his eyes narrowing as he read the detailed movements of Jiraiya and the information regarding Jiraiya's efforts to gather intel on Orochimaru from the black market. With this in mind, Byakuya began to contemplate leaving Amigakure. Rather than waiting idly in Amigakure for Orochimaru to appear, it would be more effective to actively seek out Jiraiya and, through him, find Orochimaru. After a month of effort, Jiraiya finally discovered Orochimaru's whereabouts through his intelligence network. To locate Orochimaru, Jiraiya frequently ventured into the red light districts, risking exposure to the dangers of his past, and eventually learned of Orochimaru's specific location. Using Jinjutsu to control a wandering ninja in the black market, Jiraiya concealed himself inside a toad's belly, instructing the ninja to guide him to Orochimaru's location. Before long, Jiraiya halted, his gaze fixated on a feminine young man standing along the road ahead. Though this young man bore no resemblance to Orochimaru, transformation techniques could deceive the eyes, but chakra and instincts would not lie. Emerging from the toad's belly, Jiraiya stared intently at the feminine young man and said, "Orochimaru, drop the transformation technique. Your jutsu can't fool my eyes." The young man let out a soft sigh, then dispelled the transformation with a complex expression, saying, "So it's you, Jiraiya. Did the old man send you here to kill me?" "Ha! I never thought our bond would be so fragile. It's truly disheartening, isn't it? The old man sent someone to hunt you down?" Jiraiya frowned, struggling to believe that the third Hokage would send someone to kill Orochimaru, who was once his most prized student. However, thinking it over, he realized that Orochimaru was now a rogue ninja, and chasing rogue ninjas was an obligation for all Konoha ninjas. Taking a deep breath, Jiraiya spoke slowly, "I'm not here to kill you. I want you to come back. When you return, I'll plead for you in front of the old man. As long as you promise not to continue conducting human experiments in the village, you're still one of us." At these words, Orochimaru chuckled softly. "If I can't explore the limits of ninjutsu, I might as well be killed. You don't truly understand what I'm thinking. Only a fool like you would foolishly remain in the village." Orochimaru's words struck Jiraiya like a poisoned dart, igniting a surge of nameless rage within him. "Orochimaru, I'll say this one last time. I must bring you back today, even if it's just to retrieve your corpse. I can't watch you make these mistakes any longer. You mean to say you can kill me whenever you like?" Orochimaru frowned, feeling belittled by Jiraiya's words, which only fueled his irritation. Forming hand seals, he lunged toward Jiraiya, initiating a battle. Chapter 221, The Meeting Between Byakuya and Orochimaru. Ninjutsu, Hidden Shadow Snake Hands. Ninjutsu, Needle Jizo. With two low shouts, Jiraiya and Orochimaru clashed. One transformed his limbs into venomous snakes for offense, while the other hardened his hair as a defensive shield. Despite their fierce words, both held back during the fight, each cautious not to truly injure the other. Their jutsu were all flash and little substance, like a thunderstorm without rain. Realizing he couldn't gain the upper hand, Orochimaru scoffed, "Jiraiya, it seems your skills haven't improved much over the years. If it weren't for the support of Amigakure, winning this war wouldn't have been so easy for you. Of course, my disciple is definitely stronger than yours." He stopped, his expression shifting. "Orochimaru, don't change the subject. Ever since you refused to return to the village, we've been enemies." "Enemies, huh?" Orochimaru smirked, amused by Jiraiya's innocence. Yet Jiraiya had grown much stronger than before. Considering that his own injuries hadn't fully healed, if the battle dragged on, he might actually lose. Losing to anyone else would be acceptable, but losing to Jiraiya was simply intolerable. With that thought, Orochimaru bit his finger, smeared his blood on the ground, and shouted, summoning jutsu. In an instant, a massive snake the size of a small mountain appeared in the forest. Seeing Orochimaru summon Manda, Jiraiya bit his own finger, formed hand seals, and summoned Gamabunta, the strongest toad from Mount Maiboku. The two colossal beasts glared at each other, then asked their masters, "Jiraiya, Orochimaru, who is the enemy this time?" Both replied in unison, "The enemy is Jiraiya, Orochimaru." Hearing this, Gamabunta and Manda looked at each other in confusion, wondering if the two were playing a joke on them. "Are you two childhood friends? You've been through decades together. Don't drag us into your squabbles." Jiraiya explained to Gamabunta, "Orochimaru recently defected and is now a rogue ninja to the village. Show no mercy." Jiraiya's words reached Manda's ears, and the hot-tempered serpent snarled, "What's that supposed to mean, Jiraiya? You think the toads of Mount Maiboku can match me?" With that, Manda lunged furiously at Gamabunta, and the two titanic creatures clashed, sending shockwaves rippling through the forest, leveling vast areas around them. With their summoned beasts locked in battle, Jiraiya and Orochimaru resumed their own fight without hesitation. From taijutsu to ninjutsu, and then from ninjutsu to jinjutsu, the continuous rounds of combat began to bore Orochimaru. He wasn't here to spar endlessly with Jiraiya, and if things dragged on like this, he knew he'd ultimately be defeated. Taking advantage of a moment when Jiraiya let down his guard, Orochimaru used the Great Snake Substitution technique to evade Jiraiya's attack. Immediately afterward, he produced a Kusanagi sword from his mouth and thrust it toward Jiraiya. The Kusanagi sword was a rare and famous weapon in the ninja world, capable of cutting through steel when infused with chakra. Closing in on Jiraiya, Orochimaru used the Kusanagi to slice through Jiraiya's hair. As he prepared to aim for Jiraiya's head, he hesitated momentarily, then redirected the blade towards Jiraiya's arm. Realizing the danger, Jiraiya dodged quickly, but not quickly enough to avoid a cut on his arm. "I can't underestimate you, Orochimaru," Jiraiya said, stepping back and wiping the blood from his arm. Forming hand seals, he continued, "Looks like I'll need Sage Mode to take you down for good." Just as he was preparing to use Sage Mode, Jiraiya's arm suddenly went numb. Looking down, he noticed the wound had turned dark purple. "Orochimaru, you coated the sword with poison." Orochimaru looked at Jiraiya coldly and said, "Using poison on the battlefield is perfectly ordinary. Since we're now enemies, I'll naturally use every means against you. I hope you remember this lesson." With that, Orochimaru tossed a vial of antidote toward Jiraiya and disappeared into the depths of the forest. After driving Manda away, Gamabunta came to Jiraiya's side, observing his pale face. Though Orochimaru's poison wasn't deadly, it was enough to weaken Jiraiya substantially. "Jiraiya, you don't look well. Should we go see Tsunade?" Jiraiya shook his head, opening the antidote that Orochimaru had left behind. "No need. Orochimaru already gave me the antidote." With a sigh, he continued, "After all these years, I still can't seem to catch up to him." Ignoring Jiraiya's words about the antidote, Gamabunta frowned and asked, "Are you sure about taking an antidote from Orochimaru? He's our enemy now." Jiraiya gave a helpless smile. If Orochimaru really wanted to kill me, he could have done it just now. He wouldn't need to disguise poison as an antidote. Seeing Jiraiya's decision to trust Orochimaru, Gamabunta held his peace. Fortunately, as rivals, Mount Myaboku and Ryuchi Cave already had a tense relationship, so Gamabunta had no qualms about taking on Manda, even wanting to defeat him outright. After taking the antidote, Jiraiya began to feel better. Glancing once more in the direction Orochimaru had fled, he sighed, deciding not to pursue him. Orochimaru had shown mercy, and it wouldn't be right to keep chasing him. He'd wait for another chance in the future. Without Orochimaru to track, he felt his schedule open up and considered traveling across the ninja world to see what changes had come to it over the years. Several dozen kilometers away, Orochimaru sped through the forest. Although he had managed to defeat Jiraiya by exploiting Jiraiya's reluctance to kill him, he knew that once Jiraiya recovered, the chase would begin anew. Yet, to kill Jiraiya and sever their bond was something he still couldn't bring himself to do. Jiraiya was the third Hokage's only remaining disciple in the village. If Jiraiya died, the third would be devastated, and life would be far less enjoyable. Suddenly, Orochimaru sensed something and stopped. Standing on a tree branch, he looked ahead and noticed a young figure perched on another branch, observing him with a curious gaze. Orochimaru recognized this young ninja immediately. It was none other than Byakuya of the Akatsuki. Chapter 222, Recruiting Orochimaru. From the first moment Orochimaru laid eyes on Byakuya, a sense of alarm filled his mind. He instinctively took a few steps back to keep a safe distance. This seemingly cheerful young man was anything but kind. Heck, he was more like a cunning old fox. In a few short years, he had not only allied with the Akatsuki members to bring down Hanzo the Salamander from his position as the leader of Amigakure, but he also managed to fight the Fourth Raikage to a draw, single-handedly halting the war between Konoha and Kumogakure and even bringing Yugakure under his control. Such astonishing achievements meant that, despite being one of the legendary Sannin, Orochimaru wouldn't dare to underestimate him. Thinking back to his first encounter with Byakuya years ago, Orochimaru even felt his former self had been too naive, imagining that he could control such a monster. Though he still had some contact with Byakuya in secret, could people like them truly rely on friendship? At that moment, Byakuya leapt down from a branch and, walking towards Orochimaru, said with a smile, "Isn't this Orochimaru, Konoha's S-Class rogue ninja? Seems like I'm in luck today. I might just make a fortune." Orochimaru's heart sank, though he maintained a calm expression as he replied, "Byakuya, surely you jest. Even though I'm Konoha's S-Class rogue ninja, don't you also secretly have connections with Danzo? Are you threatening me?" Byakuya's eyes flashed with displeasure, and he slowly pulled out a kunai, saying, "I detest being threatened, and you've just fought Jiraiya, right? You probably don't have much chakra left. So, if I catch you now and turn you into Kamehagakure, how much do you think I'd make?" Hearing this, Orochimaru thought, as expected, that their encounter wasn't by chance but a premeditated move. If he had truly been severely injured in a fight with Jiraiya, both of them would probably have ended up in Byakuya's hands. With this realization, Orochimaru frowned and said, "What is it that you want, Byakuya? If you truly intended to act, you wouldn't have waited until now." Byakuya nodded, saying, as expected of Orochimaru, seeing through my thoughts so easily, "I don't actually harbor much killing intent towards you. I sought you out this time because, after you left Konoha, I wanted to invite you to join Akatsuki." "Akatsuki?" Orochimaru squinted slightly. He had heard of this group before. Wasn't it the organization Jiraiya's 3 students had established? Orochimaru had once considered joining, but given that Akatsuki was founded by Jiraiya's students, it would be dangerous to join with his current status. Seeing Orochimaru's hesitation, Byakuya smiled and said, "Don't worry. Currently, I'm the leader of Akatsuki and the true ruler of both Amigakure and Yugakure. If you're willing to join Akatsuki, I'll ensure that Yahiko and the others never find out." Hearing this, Orochimaru felt slightly tempted. For months he had been on the run, pursued by Konoha's ANBU and Danzo's root ninjas. He had also earned a fair share of enemies during his time as a frontline commander, many of whom had sent assassins after him. Although none of them could kill him, they could hinder his recovery. However, he reminded himself that he left Konoha to live a life of complete freedom, not bound to anyone else's control. Joining another organization now would defeat the purpose. Byakuya, given my status as a rogue ninja, joining Akatsuki might bring negative effects to Amigakure. Moreover, I don't wish to be bound by any constraints, so... Before he could finish, he noticed Byakuya's expression change. The smile vanished from Byakuya's face, replaced by a chilling coldness. Stepping towards Orochimaru, he said, "I apologize, Orochimaru, but I'm not asking for your opinion. This is an ultimatum. With your current strength, I don't think you're in a position to refuse me." With that, Byakuya vanished from sight, soaring into the air as explosive tags began to rain down toward the ground. Explosive tags rained down like a torrential shower, forming mushroom clouds across the ground, and the powerful shockwaves whipped around Orochimaru, sending his robes flapping wildly. Without giving him any time to react, Byakuya took advantage of the chaos. Slamming his hands onto the ground, thick vines sprouted up instantly, winding tightly around Orochimaru and absorbing his chakra. Already weakened, Orochimaru had no chance to resist and quickly became a captive. Witnessing Byakuya's actions from start to finish, Orochimaru was shocked beyond words. He had known Byakuya was strong enough to hold his own against the fourth Raikage, a monster comparable to Minato. But he hadn't realized Byakuya was so powerful that he couldn't even put up a fight. Using the paper release alone was impressive enough, but when had Byakuya also mastered would release? This was the legendary first Hokage's bloodline limit, thought to be lost to the shinobi world for decades. Although Konoha had conducted extensive experiments with Hashirama's cells over the past 10 years, only one would release user, Tenzo, had emerged. Now, right before him, Byakuya was using would release with apparent ease. With this realization, Orochimaru suddenly understood a great deal. It explained why Akatsuki was able to defeat Hanzo and seize control of Amigakure, why Byakuya carried himself with such confidence, and why he was brave enough to befriend both Jiraiya and the third Hokage. The reason was simple: Byakuya possessed Kage-level strength from the start, perhaps even surpassing the average Kage. Orochimaru refocused, looking back at Byakuya, now with a mix of respect and a growing curiosity. Byakuya's display of would release gave him a reason to join Akatsuki that he could not ignore. Whatever Byakuya's intentions in recruiting him, Orochimaru now had his own motives to get close to Byakuya and study him. Such a rare and powerful specimen didn't come along often. If he could unlock Byakuya's secrets, he might uncover the true limits of ninjutsu. Walking up to him, Byakuya smiled slightly and asked, "Orochimaru, have you calmed down now? Will you choose to become my subordinate, or do you still wish to resist?" Orochimaru stared at Byakuya without hesitation and replied, "I'll join Akatsuki, but as a condition, I want to study you. You're hiding too many secrets." "Oh? Interested in me?" Byakuya chuckled, nodding lightly. "If there's ever a time when I'm injured, you're free to collect my blood. But I'm not easily hurt." Chapter 223, Akatsuki's Objective. After Byakuya agreed to Orochimaru's condition, Orochimaru joined the Akatsuki without hesitation. He was already intrigued by the organization, and members like Kakuzu and Sasori of the Red Sand presented excellent research subjects. Besides, refusing the offer would likely mean he wouldn't leave this forest alive. Until his reanimation jutsu was perfected, Byakuya could kill him completely, denying even the chance of resurrection. Once the deal was made, Orochimaru eyed Byakuya curiously and asked, "Leader, aren't you a member of the Uzumaki clan? How did you suddenly master the first Hokage's would release?" Byakuya glanced at Orochimaru and replied nonchalantly, "There's a history of intermarriage between the Uzumaki and Senju clans. While the probability of awakening would release is extremely low, it's not entirely impossible." "Well, Orochimaru-senpai, are you annoyed that would release didn't appear in Konoha?" Orochimaru held back a sigh at Byakuya's dismissive response. He knew full well that there had been frequent marriages between the Uzumaki and Senju, but even the first Hokage's descendants hadn't awakened with release. Not even Tobirama, whom he admired, could solve that puzzle. If it were so easy to awaken, the Senju clan wouldn't have been forced to disband. Orochimaru thought back to his first disciple, Nawaki, Tsunade's younger brother and the first Hokage's grandson. If Nawaki had inherited with release, he might not have died in battle from an explosive tag. Byakuya then continued, Konoha's with release research has always been flawed. By transplanting Hashirama's cells, it's true that ninjas can gain with release, but the average shinobi can't withstand the backlash from those cells. Hearing Byakuya bring up the topic of would release experiments, Orochimaru's interest was instantly piqued. While he wasn't sure where Byakuya had acquired the data, he knew Byakuya, as a genuine would release user, understood it better than anyone. Backlash from Hashirama's cells is indeed a major problem. The village has tried raising young test subjects to adapt to the cell's violent nature, but the success rate remains very low. So, do you have any reliable solutions? Byakuya gave him a sidelong glance and replied, Of course I do, but why would I share it with you? You haven't done anything for the organization yet, and you're already asking for top-level secrets. Why should I trust you? Orochimaru was momentarily taken aback. Byakuya had a point. He hadn't earned Byakuya's trust yet. But the thought of an unknown, more efficient method for transplanting would release gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. Byakuya, noticing his eagerness, offered, If you're willing to owe me 3 favors, I'll tell you the solution. 3 favors? Orochimaru hesitated briefly, then nodded in agreement. Byakuya, no longer hiding his knowledge, explained the method discovered later by Orochimaru and Danzo. Wood release is a Kekkai Genkai formed by combining earth and water release, but I believe it actually verges on a 3-element fusion. The third element is yang release. This strong life force in yang release invades the body of the transplantee, overwhelming them with rampant energy, often resulting in death. The solution is simple, having enough yin release chakra to counterbalance it. Yin release chakra? Orochimaru nodded, half understanding. However, the sheer potency of the yang element in would release posed a problem. There were hardly any shinobi in the world capable of standing up to it. Byakuya continued, his tone calm and detached, Don't even bother trying. Only the Sharingan can neutralize the wild force of Hashirama's cells, and only if it's at least at the 3-tomo or Mangekyo level. 3-tomo Sharingan, quite the strict requirement. Hearing this, Orochimaru was struck with a realization. Ironically, the best candidates for Hashirama's cells were none other than the Senju's historical rivals, the Uchiha. No wonder Konoha's experiments had stalled. Uchiha members, the ideal candidates, never had the chance to participate. It made sense. The elders and Danzo would never risk involving the Uchiha in the wood release experiments. If an Uchiha perished during testing, that would be one thing. But if a 3-tomo Uchiha managed to successfully wield wood release, Konoha could soon become Uchiha territory. Of course, just because the village elders wouldn't act didn't mean he couldn't. Should he encounter a suitable Uchiha in the future, he would capture them to see firsthand the success rate of Uchiha with wood release transplants. Seeing Orochimaru's scheming expression, Byakuya interjected, Don't bother targeting the Uchiha. They'll eventually join our side. Some in their clan are already extremely powerful, beyond your current ability to handle. Byakuya's words contained a wealth of information that made Orochimaru's eyes gleam. First, Byakuya had intentions for the Uchiha clan, planning to bring them into the Akatsuki. This explained his cooperation with Shisui to take down the Two Tails. Byakuya possessed the means for wood release transplants, and the Uchiha were ideal candidates. If Uchiha shinobi with 3-tomo Sharingan gained would release, their power would skyrocket. Second, there were Uchiha outside of Konoha. Finally, the Akatsuki's increasing allies and expanding influence hinted at a grand design for reshaping the entire shinobi world, though the details were unclear. Clearing his thoughts, Orochimaru took a deep breath and asked, Thank you, Leader Byakuya, for sharing this knowledge. But there's one thing I still don't understand. What is the ultimate goal of the Akatsuki? Without hesitation, Byakuya answered, Akatsuki is dedicated to love and peace, uniting villages and nations in harmony. Our goal is to end all wars and usher in a long-lasting era of peace in the shinobi world. Orochimaru looked at him skeptically, clearly doubtful. He had heard similar idealistic lines countless times before. Such rhetoric had no effect on him. Seeing Orochimaru's suspicion, Byakuya shrugged and said with a bit of exasperation, "Why is it so hard for you all to trust the organization's ideals? I've never deceived any of you." "All right, perhaps I left out a few words. Akatsuki is dedicated to love and peace. Our goal is to unite every village and nation under the Akatsuki banner, achieving a world without war, a long-lasting era of peace." This time, Orochimaru understood Byakuya's true ambitions and intentions. Byakuya intended to swallow up the 5 great shinobi villages and become the ruler of the shinobi world. Chapter 224, Special Talent, Scientist of the Shinobi World. Upon learning of Byakuya's ambitions and the true goal of the Akatsuki, Orochimaru licked his dry lips. If it were any other rogue ninja in the shinobi world, they might be terrified of Akatsuki's goals. After all, in a way, Akatsuki was setting itself up to oppose the 5 great nations, ultimately becoming an organization that everyone would want to destroy. However, Orochimaru understood that, given Byakuya's planning and Akatsuki's current power, there was indeed a chance they might someday overthrow the 5 great shinobi villages. Even if they couldn't entirely topple the 5 great shinobi villages, they could still plunge the shinobi world into chaos. And chaos often serves as a ladder. Those once high and mighty Kaguya-level figures might eventually fall, becoming nothing more than material for experiments. As Orochimaru began envisioning the future, Byakuya suddenly heard a crisp, electronic notification in his mind. Orochimaru has joined Akatsuki. You have acquired a special talent, Scientist of the Shinobi World. Scientist of the Shinobi World, you possess an extraordinary ability to learn and modify a vast array of jutsu in the shinobi world. Hearing the system notification, Byakuya was slightly stunned. It was his first time receiving a talent-based reward, and it was this kind of monstrous ability. It seemed Orochimaru indeed had the potential to yield great rewards. As expected, he was the shinobi world's most brilliant scientist. After claiming the reward, Byakuya felt that all those previously complex and obscure jutsu techniques in his mind suddenly became much clearer. He could even analyze the underlying principles and perform certain modifications. With this newfound ability, he might not need Orochimaru's help to modify the reanimation jutsu on his own. However, instead of investing his energy in research, he preferred to have others do the work. Refocusing his wandering thoughts, Byakuya looked at Orochimaru again and took a ring from his pocket, handing it to him. Orochimaru, this ring is for communication within the organization. It'll also assign you tasks periodically. After infusing the ring with chakra, Orochimaru felt a slight warmth in his finger, and a message appeared before his eyes. Orochimaru looked at the ring and then at Byakuya in the distance. The ring appeared to be technologically advanced, suggesting that there were indeed some cutting-edge scientists within Akatsuki. Perhaps he could even find like-minded researchers there. Noticing Orochimaru's expression, Byakuya said casually, "You'll have plenty of time to study the ring later. For now, I have a mission for you. It can also serve to repay some of the favors you owe me." "What mission?" Orochimaru was curious about what kind of mission Byakuya would give him. From his understanding of Akatsuki, it was usually missions involving rogue ninja hunts or aiding the 5 great shinobi villages. But since Byakuya was the leader, his orders were bound to be special. Without any hesitation, Byakuya explained, "Do you know Odogekure, Hidden Sound Village, in the land of rice fields? Your mission is to take over Odogekure, clearing obstacles to connect the trade route between Hidden Rain Village and Hidden Hot Water Village." Hearing this, Orochimaru was momentarily stunned and looked at Byakuya suspiciously. Taking over Odogekure wasn't a difficult task for him, but the strange part was that he had already planned on taking control of Odogekure himself. Byakuya's assignment was almost identical to his own goal. Was this mere coincidence? Ignoring Orochimaru's doubts, Byakuya continued, Orochimaru, after taking over Otogekyure, do not reveal your identity. If you encounter other Akatsuki members, do not expose them as members of the organization. If they wish for you to join Akatsuki, simply accept without revealing our connection. Orochimaru did not object to Byakuya's request and agreed without hesitation. At the same time, Orochimaru quietly wondered what Byakuya was up to. Could it be that the Akatsuki wasn't as unified as it seemed, and that Byakuya's position as the leader was unstable? Did he have a strained relationship with Yahiko, Nagato, and the others? But after some thought, Orochimaru felt it made sense. Amagakure had a good rapport with Konoha, and if they openly accepted him, a rogue ninja from Konoha, it could rapidly damage relations between the two villages. Byakuya noticed the expression on Orochimaru's face and smirked to himself in contempt. Keeping this hidden from Yahiko and the others was only part of it. The real reason was that he didn't want Tobi or Black Zetsu to know. Those two, with their own hidden agendas, were his true rivals. After recruiting Orochimaru, Byakuya didn't linger any longer. The commotion from their earlier fight had been significant, likely drawing attention from Konoha soon. While Byakuya was confident he could handle any Konoha ninja who came to investigate, he didn't want White Zetsu to find out about his dealings with Orochimaru. Half an hour later, Jiraiya arrived at the spot where Byakuya and Orochimaru had been talking. Initially, Jiraiya hadn't planned on pursuing Orochimaru. Orochimaru had just spared him, and Jiraiya didn't have it in him to chase after him again so soon. But after sensing distant tremors in the ground, Jiraiya couldn't shake the worry that Orochimaru might be in danger. If he managed to save Orochimaru this time, it would even the score between them. Upon reaching the location, Jiraiya saw the forest had been leveled, and his heart sank. Could Orochimaru really be in trouble? If so, what should he do? After searching the area, Jiraiya turned to Gamabunta and asked, Bunta, you think Orochimaru could really be in trouble? Gamabunta, holding his pipe, replied, and wouldn't that be for the best? Orochimaru is a wanted rogue ninja, after all. You feeling sympathy for a traitor? Jiraiya fell silent, caught in the complexity of his feelings toward Orochimaru. Seeing this, Gamabunta sighed. The bond between Jiraiya and Orochimaru was truly complicated. Just hours ago, they were fighting tooth and nail, and now Jiraiya was worried about him again. Gamabunta thought to himself that things were simpler in Mount Maiboku. Apart from fending off invasions from Ryuchi Cave, they had few troubles. Noticing Jiraiya's increasingly troubled expression, Gamabunta tried to comfort him, saying, Jiraiya, don't worry about Orochimaru. You know how he is, he's too stubborn to die, even if you did. These destruction marks could have been left intentionally to throw you off. Bunta, that does make a lot of sense. Jiraiya scratched his head, and after thinking it over, he added, but next time, don't jinx me. This toad sage is far from done for. I've never been good with words, Gamabunta replied flatly. If there's nothing else, I'll return to Mount Maiboku. Fukasaku's been waiting for me. Fukasaku, Jiraiya seemed to remember something and asked, by the way, has the great toad sage made any new prophecies? Gamabunta shook his head. The great sage has been in a deep sleep for quite a while. When he does wake up, he usually communicates directly with Fukasaku and Shima, and they'll let you know. I see, Jiraiya sighed, then chose a random direction and walked away. Chapter 225, Jiraiya's Curious Journey. With Orochimaru no longer his target, Jiraiya found himself at a loose end. He wandered across the nations, seeking inspiration for a new book and awaiting missions from the Hokage's office so he could continue contributing to his village. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. In those 3 months, Jiraiya had traveled through much of the shinobi world, experiencing various cultures and landscapes. While journeying through the Land of Fire, he encountered Tsunade, who was traveling with Shizune and drowning in debt due to her gambling habits. When Jiraiya suggested her to return to the village, Tsunade only responded with a powerful punch. Although Kanahadakure was facing a shortage of capable leadership, Tsunade still had no intention of returning, let alone participating in the selection for the 5th Hokage. In Tsunade's mind, the Senju clan had already bled enough for the village. To protect the village her grandfather founded, she had lost her granduncle, her great-uncle, her parents, her brother, and her lover. Even the proud name of the Senju had faded from the shinobi world, with only a few members left. She felt she owed nothing to Konoha, rather, it was Konoha that owed the Senju. Realizing Tsunade was resolute in her decision not to return, Jiraiya didn't press her, understanding he wasn't in any position to. After all, he himself had left the village under the pretense of pursuing Orochimaru. He couldn't ask Tsunade to do something he couldn't do himself. Besides, with Tsunade's status, her presence alone would still have a deterrent effect on the other major villages, even if she wasn't in Konohagakure. The Senju clan was deeply tied to the village's legacy. After helping Tsunade pay off her gambling debts, Jiraiya obtained a promise from her to at least visit the village. He then resumed his journey across the nations. While traveling through the Land of Wind, he met a puppet master, and they discussed the concept of fate. The puppet master scoffed at Jiraiya's search for the child of prophecy. The puppet master believed there was no need to seek fate. People should simply accept whatever fate brings, including the inevitability of upcoming wars. If one dies in battle, it's merely bad luck, nothing to complain about. In the remote Takigakure, Jiraiya met a Takigakure teacher. This teacher was instructing children on survival tactics for war, emphasizing that survival offers more hope for the future. This scene reminded Jiraiya of the time he spent teaching Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan. Back then, Orochimaru had initially wanted to kill Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan to put an end to their suffering in the war-torn world, but in the end, it was Jiraiya who noticed Nagato's Rinnegan and decided to stay, believing he might be the child of prophecy. After 3 years together, he wasn't too hopeful about whether Nagato could fulfill the prophecy. He just wished the children would live well. As he continued his journey, Jiraiya encountered a wandering ninja from the Fuma clan. The Fuma ninja was robbing passing merchants and travelers. After reprimanding the ninja, Jiraiya spared his life, leaving a scar on his forehead as a reminder. Jiraiya wondered why a member of the once great Fuma clan had fallen so low. It seemed that the ninja world wars had devastated many ancient shinobi clans, erasing their legacies from history. Upon reaching the land of Earth, Jiraiya met a mysterious religious leader. A ring of destitute refugees, clad in rags and visibly malnourished, gathered around the religious leader, who muttered words of prayer to guide them in evading further disaster. Jiraiya knew that prayer alone would not stave off hardship, but he chose not to interfere. This group had lost everything, and taking away their last shred of hope would surely push them over the edge. In a way, the leader's actions reminded him of himself. Was his search for the child of prophecy not also a response to a harsh reality, a final grasp at hope by placing faith in a foretold savior? The difference between them was only superficial. With mixed feelings, Jiraiya left the land of Earth and entered the borders of the land of Grass. Since the rise of Amagakure, the space for the land of Grass had shrunk, and it could only compete by undercutting prices to attract missions. However, with the growing industrialization of Amagakure, the life of Kusagakure ninja had become increasingly challenging. At a local bar, Jiraiya encountered a disgruntled Grass ninja, drinking heavily and grumbling as he stared out the window. The Grass ninja complained about the reasons for his hardships. High client expectations made it impossible to secure contracts, and the prosperity of Amagakure next door had depressed living standards in Kusagakure. Hearing all this, Jiraiya found himself getting impatient. He joined in the complaining, aided by a few rounds of sake. He lamented the unfairness of the shinobi world. Why did his student, the 4th Hokage, have to die? Why did Orochimaru betray the village? Why had the 3rd Hokage allowed Danzo to stir up so much trouble, letting injustices fester within the village? After the alcohol wore off, Jiraiya nursed a headache, sipping on some sobering tea as he looked toward the land of rain. After so much time spent traveling the shinobi world, he decided it was time to visit Amagakure. Although Amagakure was led by Hanzo the Salamander, the village was now effectively managed by his former students. He was curious to see how Yahiko and the others had shaped the village. Yet Jiraiya didn't hold high hopes. Outside the land of fire, most small nations still lived under heavy burdens. The brutal shinobi wars might have ended, but the covert and overt conflicts within the shinobi world were far from over. Ninjas still led precarious lives, scraping by through lethal missions. A few hours later, Jiraiya crossed the border into the land of rain from the land of grass. As he entered, he immediately noticed the differences between the two nations. Though the land of grass had better weather, the contrast at the border was staggering. The roads in the land of grass were muddy trails. Jiraiya himself could navigate them effortlessly, but for ordinary travelers, it was difficult terrain. In the land of rain, however, the roads were paved and smooth concrete. The disparity was a gaping chasm, and Jiraiya grew even more curious about Amagekyu's inner workings. With newfound interest, Jiraiya quickened his pace. Before long, a group of shinobi blocked his path. Leading them was none other than Nagato, who was overseeing the construction projects around Amagekure. Seeing Jiraiya, Nagato looked up with a puzzled expression. "Jiraiya-sensei?" That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 9. Peace.